again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets left center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani. Around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
Three of the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
So what is it going to take for me to get you to watch Real Housewives of Salt Lake City with me?
Oh, I don't know. It took you a year and a half for me to watch Shoresy, so.
Yeah,
I am gonna watch one that you recently started watching though, the Penguin. I'm gonna watch that at some point.
Ooh, so I have to watch the second. Yeah, there's only been 2 episodes so far, but I've only seen the first one. But oh, it's so good, dude.
I've heard good things. I don't know if I want to wait for a few more episodes and just kind of binge like 3 or 4 altogether. I don't know.
Honestly,
are they
if you're
releasing them
gonna
weekly
wait,
or
I
no?
would just wait till the whole thing is out.
Are they releasing them weekly?
Yeah, weekly.
I might wait till the whole thing's out.
I mean, if you haven't started it, I would wait till the whole thing is out and just watch the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's what I'll probably do. Seems like the best bet at this point.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Plus, we got hockey starting back up, so
Yeah, that's true. We do.
which means I can
That's a thing that's going to be happening.
direct my attention away from Manchester United and maybe be happy. But we're talking about Ducks hockey, so probably not. But
Yeah.
I just traded for Cutter Gauthier in fantasy hockey, so
Who'd you trade away?
Dylan Strome.
Oh, that's interesting. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to include a pick?
I got a pick back. I had to fight for it, but I don't know. I figured the risk was worth it. He looked pretty good. Him and Carlson looked real good last game. And it's just, I don't know. It gives me a reason to root for them. Guys, Zegras went before I thought he would go. Leo Carlson actually got drafted by somebody. And this is not not Ducks fans. This is like Leafs fans and whatever. So I was surprised that Carlson went, McTavish went. Terry's usually the only guy who goes, but
Right.
a few of them went. So, and Cutter went. So I was like, the guy traded Strome to us, Ovi. So it was an easy get. I'm just gonna bank on it. We'll see how Cutter does. I'm excited, man. They look good, and Leo Carlson looks real good.
Yeah. I mean, I think Jackson LeCombe looks like he's taken the biggest step. He looks fucking great.
That blue line. We have
We're gonna get into that. Yeah.
Ducks preview that's coming up, but that blue line looks like a logjam right now for guys to get in there.
Okay, so do we want to do the Radko Gudas captain thing real quick, or do we want to just do that when we do the Ducks thing?
We'll just do that when we do the Ducks thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're just doing the double today.
Yeah, we're just doing Atlantic Division. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well then. Wait. Okay. Sorry.
What?
Nothing.
Yeah. Wait. So what do you wait? Wait. What are we doing today?
Are we just doing the Atlantic, or do we doing the Atlantic and the Pacific?
Oh, yeah, we can do both. Yeah, let's do
Or
it.
do you want to just lump the Pacific in with the Ducks?
No, let's do both. I'm down.
Okay.
Let's get yeah. Well, that would give us a reason to rip through them a little bit quicker, and then
Yeah.
I guess we kind of need to too because we've got season starting officially technically tomorrow.
Right.
Even though it's just Buffalo, New Jersey back to back for Friday, Saturday, and then the season doesn't actually start until I think the 9th is the first kind of official slate of games. So, and the Ducks don't play till the 12th. So yeah, let's bang them both out. We'll go. I mean, we'll go Atlantic, and then we'll go Pacific, and then if you want to, if we have time, we're not rolling too far. We can kind of roll the Gudas
Yeah.
situation into that while we briefly talk Anaheim, and then we'll do our full Ducks breakdown in the next few days before the 12th. So.
That sounds perfect.
All right, Atlantic. First up, Montreal Canadiens. How are we feeling? Recently finding out Patrick Laine is out 2 to 3 months after that brutal knee hit. That's a rough start.
So he's out 2 to 3 months, and Reinbacher is out 5 to 6 months.
Yeah, I didn't even think. Honestly, did not know Reinbacher was close to making their opening roster. Had no idea.
I think they were going to give him every opportunity to do so, is how I will say it. That's my understanding of it. Um, I mean, yeah, I guess the first place to start is with the Patrick Laine trade. And now the injury. It only being 2 to 3 months is good, obviously. You know, you saw the play and thought it was going to be a lot longer. Potentially, the season could be lost, which would have been absolutely devastating for him. I think he only played like 6 or 7 games last year. Um, and obviously, this gives Montreal a chance to get him back for the majority of the year. And even if you don't necessarily like their odds of making the playoffs this year, having this year for him to play with the group and go into next year, which will be a contract year, um, is, I think, very, very valuable. I guess, like, yeah, okay, so what are your thoughts on the injury and Line A?
Yeah, it's brutal for what Patrick Laine has had to go through to kind of get back and be ready to play. For you to get injured in preseason, I think this first game, right?
Yeah,
In a Montreal uniform, played a few minutes with the team, then you get injured and you're out 2 to 3 months. You're back on the sidelines. Like that's tough for a guy who's had to deal with things that he's had to deal with over the last few years. Sucks for him, sucks for the team. The good news, like you said, is that it is only 2 to 3 months. You know, he'll be back likely before or just after Christmas, you would imagine, depending on the schedule, and they'll be able to kind of know where they stand at that point, and hopefully, if you're a Montreal fan, make a push for a wild card spot. I know it's a bit of a stretch. They didn't do too much this offseason other than adding Patrick Laine, so there's a long way to go from where they finished last year, which was bottom of the Atlantic Division. But it will give them a chance to ramp things up, see how Cole Caulfield does, Nick Suzuki does, kind of get Kirby Dach back for hopefully a full season as well for them to see how he does. So, and then obviously the Lane Hudson is their kind of prize jewel. They'll want to see how he develops. So they'll have some time to kind of feel the roster out a little bit, and then add him back for a crucial point for them to try and make a push.
yeah, I mean, they really are cursed by division. I think in any other division, you could say this team, you know, doesn't have really any overly stable goaltending. You know, Sam Montembeault was 10th last year in goals saved above expected at 5-on-5. You know, he played half the games, but I think, you know, we've seen goalies have one good year or half a good year or whatever, and I don't think either Montembeault or Primo has proven that they're a trustworthy number one starter who you're like, we can give that guy 50 games and it's okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big question mark for them. I think obviously the potential of adding line A and being able to balance out their lines and really having the same player twice. Like it's actually kind of funny because like if you think about like Caulfield and line A, it's like that movie Twins with like Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like I just imagine like imagine Patrick Laine, Cole Caulfield standing next to each other, and you
Yeah.
go, "What do you guys do?" We go, "Oh, we literally do the same thing. We are both goal scoring wingers in the same league." Like it's just very funny to me. But like, I think there's a lot to like there. I think a big question obviously is about what kind of offense they're going to be able to get out of that blue line. Like, Mike Matheson put up like 62 points last year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to be able to rely on him to do that again. I don't think they really have anybody else who can produce at a high level other than Lane Hudson.
Yeah, that's their hope, I think.
I think that's basically the hope is like he steps in and he's able to produce at a high level. Anaheim fans are obviously familiar with him in so much as he's similar to Olin Zellweger in terms of being an undersized, creative, offensive blue liner. And I think we all saw that there were flashes from Olin Zellweger, but it's still hard to transition into this league as a 21, 22, whatever it is, year old defenseman.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add in the fact that they're not the biggest guys, and so that adds another part of a learning curve that they're going to have to adjust to and things like that. And so I think this team is kind of cursed in so much as the other teams in the division, and there's a lot to like here, but none of it adds up to a playoff, which is maybe fine. You know, maybe they hope Reinbacher heals up and is a legitimate number one guy, and Demidov comes over in a year or two, and he's a legit top six winger, and suddenly you're looking at a team with a lot of players on it.
Yeah, I think they're in need of another top five pick this year to go out and probably get a guy who could eventually be the number one center. I really like Nick Suzuki. I don't think he's an elite first line center on a competitive team. I think he's a great number two, and I think he's an okay like 1B, but he's obviously the only option that Montreal has right now. But I
You
think
know who he reminds me of?
who?
Dylan Larkin.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think he's a Dylan Larkin, where if you're like, he's our 1C, we can get away with it, but we need a good 2C behind him. He's not, right? Like, it's kind of like
Yeah, right now
having
it's what
Jordan
Kirby?
Stahl as your number one center, like
Yeah.
Carolina did for a minute. It's like, yeah, like we can get away with this because he's a really good player. But he's, we do need to provide some help behind him. And that's why they traded for Kirby Dack. And hopefully that's something that like Uri Slafkovsky can help fix, or Demidov can fix, which is driving that other line and giving them someone on the second line who can be a difference maker for them and limit the drop off behind Nick Suzuki, because that's the other problem. It's not just that Nick Suzuki is maybe a middle of the pack or lower end number one center, is that there's nobody fucking behind him. And that's what screws that team with anyway. So obviously having Dak is going to be helpful this year, but we still don't really know what he is. His development's been up and down. He was out last year with injury. Like, he's still a question mark.
He hasn't played enough games to really know what he is at this point. I think the thing with Montreal is they are in a very similar position to the Ducks, but they're a couple pieces behind where the Ducks are right now, where the best you can hope for from Montreal this year is that the young players continue to play well, that Slafkovsky builds on the strong second half that he had last year and becomes worthy of being the player where he was selected at. You hope Lane Hudson can play the full season in Montreal and eventually take over power play one and show that he can be responsible for those duties. That's kind of the hope in Montreal. Like, the only offseason addition, like we said, is Line, and you don't get to see him for a couple months. You do draft Demidov, but again, with the fact in drafting a player who's playing in the KHL right now, you're not going to see him for a couple of years, so you kind of lose out on the hype of having a high draft pick that could make the roster. So there isn't really much different in Montreal from where they were last year. So I just can't see them leapfrogging any teams really in this division, barring some significant progression from guys like Cole Caulfield and Yuri Slafkovsky and Lane Hudson, and somebody on that in between the pipes there taking over the number one job and becoming a legitimate starting goaltender in the NHL. But I just can't see that happening.
Yeah, I think there's just not enough there yet to feel very confident in any direction. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a team that is pretty much just looking at next year being basically they need to answer some questions this year, right? Which is, do they have a creative player who can generate offense on the back end, and do they have a starting goalie? They signed Sam Montembeault to I think it was a 3-year extension. I'm pretty sure this deal, I'm looking at it right now, kicks in. Yeah. They signed him in December. He got a 3-year, $3 million extension. So, like, they obviously think that there might be something there. And, they're going to be hoping that that's true. And then they're going to be hoping that Lane Hudson looks like the guy they think he could be. And based on his play in college, there's a lot of things to be excited about there. I think people thought he could have been in the, like, Hobie Baker Award conversation last year for college hockey. And that's something that, like, with Ducks fans having Cutter Gauthier and then San Jose having Macklin Celebrini and Ryan Leonard and Will Smith and Gabe Perreault, like, there was no shortage of great college players last year. And Lane Hudson was someone people thought could make a serious argument to be in that conversation. So it'll just be down to that, right? It'll be, is Lane Hudson what we think he is, and is Sam Montembeault what we think he is? And if the answer to both is yes, then I think you're expecting next year them to make the playoffs.
Yep.
That's
All
what
right.
you need this team to be.
On to the Ottawa Senators, who finished, 1 point above Montreal? No, 2 points above Montreal, 78 points last year. Um, I want to say kind of similar in off seasons to Montreal, where they didn't make a ton of additions, just kind of one major addition, where Montreal added Line and Ottawa added Linus Ullmark in
Mm-hmm.
net. Listen, I don't love Linus Ullmark. I'm really interested to see how he does outside of a Boston system. I do think it was a good move for Ottawa, though, because you look at their goaltending last year. It was Anton Forsberg played 30 games, and Jonas Korpisalo played 55 games for the Sens. They desperately needed a starting goaltender, and without question, one who is a starting goaltender, Linus Ullmark, is that. So they get him in. I think that's a huge boost for them and should help them out. Then they add, I think David Perron would have been the only other addition, and he essentially comes in and replaces Vladimir Tarasenko, who went out the door. So not a major change in the forward group, really, other than David Perron coming in to replace Vladimir Tarasenko. The blue line looks roughly the same, so you just get another season out of Jake Sanderson to see what you got, and you still have Shabbat, Zub, Hamonic, Tyler Clevin, and Bernard Docker, and then they added Nick Jensen. I know there was a trade that
They
came
moved
over.
out Jacob Chikrin to
Right,
Washington.
right. Yeah, that's where he comes in, and so some movement, nothing crazy. Um, Relying on Tim Stutzler to take steps forward, Brady Tkachuk and Josh Norris, a fully healthy Josh Norris, Drake Batherson, Claude Giroux. You're relying on kind of the regular cast for Ottawa to take them forward here. I don't know if they can really jump high up the standings. Like, we have a kind of a big three, maybe big four in the Atlantic. It's going to take a lot for some of these teams to jump in front of them. I don't necessarily think Ottawa has enough yet to do it.
Yeah, I mean, they had 4 60-point players last year. Their blue line is capable, if, perhaps unexciting, right?
Well,
There's going to
they
be,
scored goals, right? Like, they did score goals last year.
yeah, and like, so I guess, yeah, like, it'll be fine. Like, I like the team. I don't love the team. I guess, yeah, they're just basically banking on Linus Ullmark to be the answer to all their problems. Their coach is Travis Green. Um, they ended the season last year with was it Jacques Martin?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And they started
Uh,
with DJ Smith, right?
yeah, and ended with Jacques Martin
Yeah.
coaching 56 games. So like, whatever. Like, I'm not over. I guess the thing is, this is like, if they're gonna have any hope of making the playoffs, Tim Stutzla needs to be 100-point player. Like, he needs to be 100-point player. Like, he, put up 90 in his 21 season. I think that's the year that got him the big extension. And then last year he put up 70, which isn't bad, but like, dropping from 39 goals to 18 goals is considerable. Oh, here you go, Eddie. What do you think the difference in his shooting percentage between his 39 goal year and his 18 goal year is?
For who, sorry?
What's the difference in his shooting percentage between 22-23, where he scored 39 goals, and last year, where he scored 18?
5 points. 5 percentage points.
8. He dropped from 17 to 9.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
really bad.
if
Yeah.
if he's if he can get back up into that like 25 to 30 range and be an 85-point player, then maybe you feel a lot better.
Mm.
But he's got to at least be that. Like, if he's just a 70-point player, I don't know that that's good enough.
Yeah, he's got to be in that 90-point range for them to really make a difference and make a push. Like the thing for me with the Sens is I look back, I look where they are now, and they have good young pieces, and they're making moves in the right direction. Adding a goaltender was a smart move. Carter Yukemchuk might actually make the roster. So on the blue line, they might finally have a dynamic right shot defenseman. So if you have Shabbat and Sanderson and Yukemchuk on the back end, if you can start and if they can all stick for the entire year, things look better there. Um, it's up front and adding some depth pieces there. And I always look back at the 2021 draft where they drafted Tyler Boucher 10th overall and thinking of some of the other guys they could have in this lineup right now that could be helping them out. Like that, imagine, you can say it's for any team between 10 and 23, but imagine if they had Wyatt Johnston right now added to
Right.
this group, right? Like if they didn't miss on that pick, you'd have another young, dynamic player, whether it be a forward or defenseman, added to this roster. And I think that could make a difference for them. But they certainly are in better shape than some other teams. I like the top six. I like Stützle, Kachuk, Norris, Batherson, Giroux, and Perron. I think that's solid. I think you can win a lot of hockey games. You can score enough goals with that. Pinto rounding out um, into your third line with Ridley Grieg and a few other guys that they could kind of piece together and put there. Like it has the makings of a decent young group. But yeah, again, I just don't know if it's all come together. If it's all going to come together this season, I think they're a couple years out from a lot of it coming together. And again, like you had mentioned, it's finding out exactly what Tim Stützle is, waiting for Sanderson and Kemchuk to kind of come into their own and get a few years of experience, and seeing if Linus Ullmark is the answer for Ottawa or not. So I think they'll be better than last year. I think they'll be good enough for long enough that there'll be some discussion about if they could kind of sneak in. But I think ultimately over the full length of the season, it's just going to tail off.
Yeah, I don't see a huge path forward for them. I guess, maybe I'm a little too low on Drake Batherson.
Hmm.
If Drake Batherson is legit and Carter Yukemchuk can make a push for the Calder, then maybe it's a completely different conversation, right? Because you've added some dynamism, you've added some depth and some stability. Um, I'm not completely sold, I guess. And yeah, I guess that's really it. It's just like I feel like the players individually to some degree, like I like a lot, but I don't know that like other than Brady Kachuk, I don't know that any of them have hit their absolute ceiling, right? Like Brady Kachuk's really fucking good. Um, and it looks like Tim Stützle might be really fucking good. We don't know for sure. And if he's not, then there's a lot of questions. And like they did lose their fifth and sixth leading goal like scorers last year in Chikrin and Tarasenko, who both
Yep.
had 41 points. So, yeah, I the only reason I don't think they'll slip behind Montreal is their goaltending is probably too stable.
Yeah, I
Assuming
think they've got
assuming
enough.
Allmark stays healthy.
Yeah, they've got a bit more sure things in terms of talent in their top six than Montreal
Sure.
does, I would say too. Um, but yeah, it's not significantly better, and they did only finish 2 points ahead of Montreal next year. But I think the goaltending is going to make enough of a difference that they'll build a gap there. Um, it's just, are they going to be good enough to move in front of the teams in front of them? Like that's the question. And a couple of the teams we're going to talk about, I think, have a legitimate chance to make a climb up the standings. Where I,
Let me ask it this way.
yeah,
Do you think they could finish fourth in the Metro?
in the Metro, um, yeah, I think they'd be in the mix because the teams we talked about being in there, the Islanders, the Capitals, the Penguins, the Flyers. I don't think the Sens are significantly worse than those teams. Um, So I'd put them in the mix, yeah, in the Metro, which is wild when you think like they'd be the second worst team potentially in the Atlantic, but they could be the fourth best team in the Metro. Shows you the kind of the gap in talent, I guess. But yeah, I think they could make a case for sure.
Yeah, because I mean, basically, that's your hope if you're them, right? Is you make a big jump and finish fifth in your division, and you get five teams into the playoffs. That's their best bet, is finishing fourth or fifth in their division and making a push for the wild card. Like they seem like a team who, if everything goes right, they get a second wild card spot. Because I think the two teams we're about to get to, you can make an argument that goaltending is not like of the bottom four teams, Linus Ullmark's the best goalie.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah,
So
yeah, he has the better track record. I really want to get into this next team because I'm intrigued by many things about the Buffalo Sabres. But
so go. What are you intrigued about?
so
Talk to me.
the one thing I want to bring up is I've talked about these players individually, just outside in different conversations about the years they had last year compared to the years they had 2 seasons ago. What is the case with Buffalo right now? Because everybody kind of had a down year last year. Like Alex Tuck was their leading goal scorer with 59 points in 75 games. Tuck, Dahlin, Thompson, and Cousins all had down years compared to the seasons they had prior to that. Which players are these? So which Sabres can we expect? Are was last year a down year or was the year before that an up year? What can you expect this year? Like just for reference, like Tuck last year, 22 goals, 59 points, 75 games. The season prior to that with Buffalo, 36 goals, 79 points in 74 games. Rasmus Dahlin last year, 20 goals, 59 points in 81 games. The season before that, 73 points in 78 games. Tage Thompson had the 40-40 year, 47 goals, 47 assists, 94 points in 78 games last year, 56 points in 71 games. And then finally, Dylan Cousins, 68 points, 31 goals the season prior. Last year, he had 18 goals, 47 points in 79 games. So they all had downticks in production. What is that from? Is it the coaching? Is it, I'm trying to connect the dots and see where, because you usually see one or two players like that, but for arguably your four best players on your team to all go kind of turn down in production, and it's not like it was distributed really anywhere else. Like JJ Peterka had an up year, but beyond that, those are your top five scorers, and you lose Casey Middlestat, you lose Jeff Skinner. Like, what do you expect from these guys this year?
So Rasmus Dahlin's shooting percentage went up. Alex Tuck's went down.
Mm-hmm.
Tage Thompson's went down. And Jeff Skinner's went down. And all by at least 5 points. That's what happened, is their shooting normalized, and the rest of the team isn't good enough to make up for the gap. Like,
So did it normalize, or are they below what you expect them to be? Like that's the thing. Is it
well,
back
here, let's
back
look
down,
at it this way.
back down to a regular average last year, or I'm just trying to figure them out and what to expect from them this year.
So Tage Thompson shot 11.8 last year.
Mm-hmm.
He was 15.9 the year before, so 4.
What's his
And
career
15
average?
flat. His career average is 12.5.
Okay, so he's right around that last year, yeah.
So there is a world where, with some stability and some coaching, not Dylan Cousins, I'm talking about Tage Thompson, sorry, becomes a 30 goal, 30 assist center. His power play goals dropped in half. Like, I just, like, this, again, we talk about this all the time with these fucking deals for these players based off of these 1 years, and this idea that if they hit, people are so afraid of having to pay these guys what they're worth down the line that they're willing to risk overpaying them. Like, I don't think Dylan Cousins and Tage Thompson are $7 million players. They seem like they could be, but they're not now. And giving them these deals removes any potential flexibility to add pieces now. Like, Tage Thompson's already 26. He's going to be 27 at the end of this year, or at the end of October. Like, this team is good, but not great, and none of the forwards are special. I think that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's
The
thing
most
is
special player on the team is Rasmus Dahlin.
Tage
very
Thompson,
good.
if he is a 90-point player, then you're looking at a team that can make things happen. If Dylan Cousins is a 70-point
Sure.
player, right? Like if you've got
If
four
yeah,
guys
if
who can score 70 plus and one guy who can get 90, then you're looking at a team that can be competitive. But none of them scored over 60 last year, so you're just kind of in this
none of them
limbo
reached
period.
60,
Yeah,
they all hit 59.
yeah. So it's a weird spot to be in because most of them, and even Tage, they're all good young players. They've all had good years in the past. Yeah, like they've got Jack Quinn, who will be a player that they're going to rely on heavy this year. JJ Paterka had a good year. You're hoping he steps forward and continues to grow. Zach Benson, another year. So like you've got some young players to go and mix in with Tage Thompson and Dylan Cousins and Alex Tuck. So things look good there. Obviously Rasmus Dahlin. And Owen Power on the blue line. You bring in Bowen Byram. So you've got a good young core on the blue line, but I just don't know how all the pieces fit together. Like I look at Owen Power and I don't know why he makes $8.3 million.
Yeah,
I don't know what he's doing to do that. I don't know where all the pieces fit together for this team, but you still kind of look at this roster and you think like there's a chance things go well for them, right? Like they have enough here
here
and enough.
here's the thing.
Yeah.
There's two factors we haven't touched on yet. The first factor is that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is their goalie.
Mm-hmm.
He had a great year last year.
Yeah.
It was his first year having a positive game saved above expected. Goals saved above expected. He had a 910 save percentage last year. The year before that, he was below 900. He was like 890. And they just gave him a fat extension, making like almost $5 million a year. I have it right in front of me. I don't know why I'm not looking at it. Yeah, 475 for 5 years. And it's like, okay, is he this guy? Is he not this guy? In his 2 full years as an NHL starter, he's been below 900 and 910. If he's just 905, I don't think that's good enough. And then the other thing is their coach is Lindy Ruff, who got fired last year in Dallas with a more talented forward group because of bad goaltending. So your biggest question mark or the biggest issue on your roster, and it's the same stink that got your new coach fired from his old job. It's why you were able to hire him.
Mm-hmm.
I like players on this roster, but basically, like, I guess I'll say it this way. Saying, save me, Zach Benson and Lindy Ruff, save me, is not something I'm confident in.
Like I can confidently say I think there'll be more than one player who scores more 60 points for Buffalo this year. So in that sense, there's some improvement that can be had there. But if they're not getting close to what they did 2 seasons ago, then we start looking and comparing them to a team like Ottawa, where we're saying, well, if Tim Stützle can hit 90, and we're more confident that Stützle can hit 90 points than Tage Thompson, then you're more confident in Brady Tkachuk than you are Alex Tuck, and you're more confident in Claude Giroux or whoever than Dylan Cousins, and then you add in Batherson and the guy Norris and the guys we talked about are a little bit more established than a Jack Quinn and a Zach Benson, right? So then you sort of look at those two rosters and say, okay, well, there's a lot of similarities, and I don't see how one is much better than the other. And if we're saying that Ottawa is going to struggle to get much better, then where I don't know why I just have this weird optimism for the Sabres looking at the roster. Like I don't know what it is, but I look at their roster and there's just weird optimism that they should be able to do well. But when you break it down, beyond the blue line being better than Ottawa's, there isn't a major difference, and there's a lot of question marks in this Sabres roster and whether they can actually even improve on what they did last year.
I think there's a lot to like on this roster because you've seen all of these players play at a level above how they played last year.
Yeah.
You've never seen them all do it at the same time. And that's the problem. Like, right now, I think I'd rather be Buffalo than Montreal or Ottawa for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
If you ask me for 3 or beyond, I would rather be the other two because the best parts of this roster, I don't know how much room for improvement there is, and I don't know that they have as much support coming as you would like. I just, again, like, because it's Lindy Ruff, I think there's maybe a world in which everybody, bounces back offensively, but I'm not 100% confident that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is going to be able to fucking prevent this team from just being 4-3 losses. I just, there's more. The things I'm worried about are overweight or outweighing the things I'm excited about.
No, yeah. I think that's fair. It's that, yeah. I think for me, it's the 2 seasons ago and looking at what all these guys did individually and saying, well, if they can do that and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen can do what he did last year, then in theory, this team should be very good
Yes.
because they've.
If Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is the goalie he was last year, this is a
Yeah.
very different conversation.
Yeah, because, I mean, you look at them last year and they had the second or third best defensive record in the Atlantic Division, but they only scored 246 goals, which was second worst. And then you say, okay, well, the season before that, everybody popped off. So if they can get back to somewhat close to that and still get the same defensive record as last year, then they should be better. If they're scoring, 270 goals and only allowing 240, they should pick up some more wins here and there and be in the wild card conversation. But there's no guarantee, again, with a new coach coming in, that that can be the case because we don't know if the forward group are those types of players. We don't know which is which yet, right? It's the same conversation we're having with, say, Trevor Zegras, for example, where he had back-to-back
Sure.
60-point years and then obviously injury-ridden off kind of down season last year. We're trying to figure out what type of player we have on a consistent
Yeah.
level, right? And that's where I think the Sabres are this year, and it's a pivotal year for all those guys, is what type of player are you? Are you the guy from 2 seasons ago? Are you the guy from last year? Are you somewhat in the middle of that? And the same thing with Luukkonen. Are you the guy from last year or the guy from 2 seasons ago? Are you a starting netminder or not? So there's a lot of question marks for the Sabres, but there is that like underlying potential that if everything goes right for them, they have a real shot at being a sneaky good team in this division.
Yeah. Let me say it. I'll say it this way. They were third in the division in goals against per 60 at 5v5 last year,
Mm-hmm.
but they were second worst in expected goals against per 60.
Jeez.
They outscored, so they outdefended and outscored their expected goals. I don't see that happening again. Yeah, their expected goals for percentage was 47.4. Their goals for percentage was 52.2. They overperformed last year and still missed the playoffs.
Yeah, not a
I'm just
remedy for
not.
continued success.
I just don't know, man. Again, like I said, I think ultimately, I think Linus Ullmark being the best goalie in the bottom four is the closest thing to a determining factor here. God, am I talking myself into Ottawa? What the fuck?
I think we are. That's the sad thing. All right, well, let's move on to the next team, the Red Wings. And again, I feel like they're just in this mix, man. Like I start looking at these teams, and I really did have high hopes when I was coming into this about discussing Detroit and Ottawa, and maybe their hopes of dethroning some of the teams above them. But then you just start diving into it, and it's not significantly different from where they were last year. Like Raymond, Larkin, DeBrincat are kind of their main trio up front. Gosta Spears moved on to Carolina. He had 56 points for them on the blue line, so they're going to have to make something up there. Full season of Patrick Kane will help. Tarasenko Perron switch with Ottawa, so Tarasenko comes into Detroit now, and Perron's out the door. So you have some kind of additions by subtraction there, but the forward group is largely the same. The blue line is largely the same. Maybe you add a younger player in Simon Edvinsson. And then in net, you've got two of the same goalies of last year, in Husso and Alex Lyon, and then you add Cam Talbot. So I'd like to think that Detroit could pull things together and do better, but I just don't. I mean, there's just not significant improvement. And like you're banking on 36-year-old Patrick Kane to be a point per game player, and Vladimir Tarasenko to come in and be a close to point per game player to really add some offense to this team. I don't know how confident I am in that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think for all intensive purposes, this team is pretty much in the same place as Buffalo. I just like the players a little bit more. You know what I mean? I like Lucas Raymond more than I like Dylan Cousins. I like Mo Seider more than I like Owen Power. I like Dylan Larkin more than I like Tage Thompson. Like, I like what this Detroit roster has, but again, it's like the sum of the parts isn't good enough. And I don't like Philly Husso and Cam Talbot as my two goalies. Like, I love Cam Talbot, but like, I don't think the defense core in front of him is good enough to make up for the fact that he's 37 years old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's not enough upside here unless you're going to tell me they have 4 guys hit 40 goals.
Yeah, and,
right?
and last
Like,
year what they had 2 hit 30. Like the brink
Yeah.
of not hitting 30 was really a bit interesting. I think you bring him in hoping he's going to be a 40 goal scorer, and
you hoped he could push for 50.
I mean he comes in and does basically identical to what he did the season prior in Ottawa, just one extra assist. So you want him to come in and hit at least 40, and like you said, push for 50, and he doesn't. And Lucas Raymond's the one who takes a step forward and becomes the 30-goal scorer, 70-point player, and leads the team. I mean, Dylan Larkin in a full healthy season would have led the team in scoring, but I don't know if there's
two
enough
guys who almost hit 20 goals last year, and both of them are gone now. 2 guys who scored 18 goals, Daniel Sprong and Robbie Fabry, and both of them are gone now. The
David
6th and
Perron's
7th
gone,
leading
too.
goal spinners.
Perron had 17, he's gone as well.
Like, again, real quick, just to sneak this in, it's weird that Daniel Sprong went and had 18 goals and 25 assists in 76 games and third line minutes or whatever, and another team was like, you know what, we don't need an 18-goal scorer. Weird how that keeps happening to him.
Yeah.
Insane. We keep trying to find what happened. But I just, I don't. Simon Edmondson doesn't come in and fix this roster. Marco Kasper isn't coming in to fix this roster. Like, I don't.
I think the loss of Shane Gostisbehere is going to be significant.
It's a big deal.
They don't have anybody else who can drive offense on the blue line on this team.
A team, like, again, like, this is stupid, but like, they really should be in on Cam Fowler. They don't have anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Mo Seider apparently last year had like a historically tough quality of competition matchup. He was getting some of the most brutal minutes in the analytics area, basically, as far as deployment and who he's going up against. And he's out there the entire time with Ben Sherratt on a hope and a prayer. Like, this just isn't. It's not good enough, and I just don't know where the improvement is supposed to come from unless you're going to say Alex DeBrincat scores 50 goals and we basically ride his 50 goals to an improved power play and, 4th in the division.
I'll tell you this. If I could have any player on the Ducks, it'd be Moritz Seider. I love that kid, man. He's unbelievable, but he can't do it himself, and the rest of that blue line is just suspect. Sherrod, Paul, Mata, Petrie, Gustafsson, it's
like, how much would they be hurting to have fucking Philip Roenick right now?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like,
that'd be huge for them, and now he's a second, third option for Vancouver because they're running Quinn Hughes, so it's.
I guess that's my thing. Like, I love Dylan Larkin, man. I
Yeah.
really am in the bag for Dylan Larkin, and I think he's a really good player. He's just finally gets a little bit of help, but it's still not enough because he doesn't have a goalie.
Mhm.
Like,
Well, no, they've got to get a lot of good pieces on the way. They're just not here yet. Like Brandsteg Nygaard, Nate Danielson, Marco Casper, but they're not ready yet. Axel Sandin Pelika is on his way, but like, Sebastian Kosa is still like that. That's, I guess, their hope in net eventually, is that he'll be the starting netminder, but it's not going to be this season. So like they've got good young pieces eventually to go with, Lucas Raymond and Alex DeBrincat and Moritz Seider, but like how much longer is it going to take, and then how much time are you wasting of Dylan Larkin to get
right.
there, right? Like this team needs Dylan Larkin at his best to be successful the way they're built right now, and they don't have much more time left to really to put all the pieces together.
He turned 28 this summer, so he'll be 28 this whole season.
Mm-hmm.
And Alex DeBrincat is going to turn 27 in the middle of December. Those are two of their top 5 or 6 guys on the team.
Yeah.
They don't have time to wait for Sebastian Kosa to be his 3rd year in the NHL and emerge as a legitimate starter. They don't have, like, there's no guarantees that Brandon Nygaard or is it Hellenius? Which one did they take? They took Brandon Nygaard. I always
Buffalo
doubt myself. But they don't really have time to wait for Brandon Nygaard or Marco Casper to take a normal development path. They need someone to pop now. And I don't think the ghost of Patrick Kane and the ghost of Vladimir Tarasenko is enough.
No. No, this team is a couple young forwards making the step a lot sooner, and a dynamic offensive defenseman away from really making any noise.
Even just a competent offensive defenseman.
I don't know
Again,
why they didn't do everything
Shane
they could
Gostisbehere
to
would have
bring
been
Shane
nice.
Gostisbehere back. Like I don't understand it. And then when you lose him, and then you don't do anything to bring anybody in, and again, like you said, they're putting all their eggs in the Simon Edvinsson basket, but he's not that type of player. He really isn't. He's similar
Right.
to what they have already in Sider, and a lot of the older defensemen they have on their roster. It's just kind of solid shutdown two-way guys.
Okay, let me ask this question. How much better do you feel about this blue line if they have Jackson Lacombe?
I don't feel significantly better, but I definitely feel like it's better than it is now, because at least it's a different piece, a different type of player than what they have on the blue line. Like if you're saying Lacombe comes in and replaces Olimata, I definitely feel better about that. But it's not significantly better.
How many points did Jeff Petrie have last year? Where did you at Jeff Petrie? Yeah, 24 points. Like 3 goals, 21 assists. Like that's not bad from the blue line.
I mean, like, so this is the thing: is like, are they trying to now push more at Sider into power play 1?
Which fine.
Which is fine. But now you can't play him the same way you played him last year. So he can't play PK1, power play 1, the most 5-on-5 minutes, because he's going to be playing 35, 40 minutes a night. Like you can't do that. So now you've got Sherratt and Hall and Petrie, who can be penalty kill guys. So if you're telling me the goal is to take Moritz Seider off of, the significant penalty kill duties and shift that to power play, I'm fine with that. We'll ride with it, see how it goes. But I don't know if he's that type of player. He's a very talented player. He's a very good young defenseman, but I don't think he's that dynamic offensive player who's going to make a difference for them. Maybe he turns out to be that. I don't know. But that's a lot of risk to put into a young defenseman, a lot of pressure to put on a young defenseman to say, hey, like we had this guy last year who, this is what he does. He is an offensive defenseman. He put up 56 points for us. Well, we let him go, and now you're going to do that for us this year. Like that's...
Yeah.
And it's a completely different role to what he's played the last few seasons for Detroit. So I really don't know what their plans are for that, but that would be the most likely situation in my mind, is that, like, what's the other option? Olimata or Jeff Petrie is power play 1 for Detroit? Like,
Yeah, there's no other option.
there's no other option.
It has to be him, and then it's just about praying, I guess. Like,
As of right now, I don't know how recent this is, but the Daily Faceoff has Eric Gustafsson as power play 1 with
Sure.
Kane Larkin, Raymond DeBrincat, and Simon Edvinsson as power play 2 with Tarasenko, Veleno, Comfer, and Berggren. So things haven't changed. Mort Seider is still penalty kill 1 with Ben Sherratt. Jeff Petrie and Simon Edvinsson are penalty kill 2. So
Yeah, I don't know, man. Yeah, dude, I'm not gonna lie. I'm 100% with you in terms of like I was really excited to talk about this division, and the longer we sit with it, the more I'm just like, oh man, it's just there's a reason that the same 4 teams have been running this division for the last few years.
yeah, I mean the we might as well that's a good segue
Yeah.
into the next team is the team who for a long time dominated this division and now has started to take a back seat to the other 3, and that's the Tampa Bay Lightning. Significant turnover in just kind of the names, obviously, with Steven Stamkos being the big one. No longer a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning. 40 goals, 81 points for Stamkos last year. He still got it. He's gone. Out the door. They did bring in a suitable replacement in Jake Gensel, who can come in and at least offensively give you something similar to what Steven Stamkos would have put up for Tampa Bay last year. The thing for me, the flexibility that Stamkos gave this roster was the big thing. And being able to play center, being able to then play him on a second line and play Braden Point center on the first line and kind of move things around and spread it out. This team has become very one-dimensional now. Is your first line is Jake Gensel, Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov. Very talented, great first line. Love it. You know, you can reminiscent of the Marchand, Bergeron, Pasternak, load everything into one basket and go and see how it works. They definitely have the talent to do that, but the drop off after those 3 is significant. It really is concerning for this team. There's not a lot of depth beyond those 3. So I don't know, man. I got a lot of question marks for that. I think they're underestimating how big of a loss Steven Stamkos is going to be for this team.
I fucking love Anthony Cirelli. Anthony Cirelli and Brandon Hagel, if you get both of them at 90% of their best, is a perfectly good second line.
Yeah, behind what is an uber talented first line like that, then yeah, I'm down for that. I can get behind that.
The question is what happens when you get to the third and fourth line, right? They
It's
traded all those
terrible.
picks for Tanner Jeannot and then got rid of Tanner Jeannot.
The third line and fourth line for the Lightning right now are third line is Michael Eissaman, Nick Paul, Connor Sheary. The fourth line is Gergensons, Glendening, and somebody named Mitchell Chaffee. That's their that's their bottom 6 right now.
And then that doesn't even get like, yeah, I think you're right. I think more than anything, the fact that they could take Steven Stamkos and make him their second line center or make Braden Point their second line center at any time is huge. I don't love replacing Stamkos with Gensel. I'm not at all sold on the idea that that's a good move. And I'm not a huge fan of getting rid of Mikhail Sergachev and bringing back Ryan McDonough. Like,
And JJ Moser is the other player they've added to that.
like, look, a team with Andrei Vasilevsky, Braden Point, and Nikita Kucherov and Victor Hedman is always going to be a competitive team. That team should be able to compete for a while. This team is going to have to miss the playoffs before I think they'll miss the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think their time as a legitimate contender year in and year out is over.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't
they're still
see
good enough
where
to compete. Like there's no doubt about it. But yeah, there's question marks. I mean, this team was one dimensional last year. They did let's not get that wrong. There were 5 players on this team that scored significantly more points than anybody else. And then there's a huge about 30-point drop off. This team was run by Kucherov, Point, Stamkos, Hedman, and Brandon Hagel. And then there was a 30 or 29-point drop-off to Nick Paul and a 30-point drop-off to Anthony Cirelli. And then even beyond that, there's another 12-point drop-off to anybody below that. So one-dimensional. It's going to be one-dimensional again. You lose the flexibility of the Stamkos point situation. But again, yeah, a team with a guy who could put up 144 points in Nikita Kucherov, and then one of the best defensemen in Victor Hedman, and then one of the best goaltenders in Andrei Vasilevsky, and arguably the best coach in the league in John Cooper, they're going to do well. They're going to be pushing for a playoff spot, but their days of running over teams, I think, like you said, I think that's over.
Yeah. I mean, I just...
What do you think we see from Jay Gensel? How do you think he does?
I think he's going to get 35 goals, and it's going to be fine. And I'm sure he'll score 10 of them on the power play, and it'll be fine.
So
but
80,
I'm not...
90-point year from Jay Gensel, just playing with Point and Kucherov in first power play?
No, I think he'll get 70 points.
So
I don't...
Similar to
He's never...
2022, 2023 in Pittsburgh, 36 goals, 73 points in 78 games.
Yeah, that sounds right. I don't think he'll get to that 84 and 76 mark. You know, I mean, last year, 52 and 50, like, I don't think he's a point-a-game player, but, like, on that team with Nikita Kucherov, like, you might as well be, like, he's certainly a guy who I expect to finish with more goals than assists.
Yeah.
And that's what they got him for, so I don't think that's going to bother them, but I don't think he has raw 50-goal potential the way that the guy they let leave did.
In Stamkos, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Here's a fun fact. Jake Gensel, going back to 2019-2020, has never hit 41 goals. A thing that, if I'm not mistaken, the guy on the team last year did at like 33 and after 15 different career-ending injuries. Yeah, he had 40 goals last year. Like, I
not
don't
just
understand
the
that
money
move. There's
to
no
bring
reason.
him Stamkos back.
I just don't get
to
it,
get a
man.
player who's only 5 years younger.
And not as good.
Just
not as good. And doesn't have the cachet in the locker room. Like, it is a baffling move to me. Like, I just... Wait a minute, I gotta look real quick. What is fucking Nashville paying Stamkos again?
I don't know.
Eight flat a year.
Less than Gensel.
Bro,
So,
there's no reason. Like,
yeah.
he got an 8x4. He got the fucking Hedman deal. There's no reason they shouldn't have given him that deal. Like, I think the world of John Cooper. I think the world of Kucherov and Cirelli and Point and Hedman. But I am not excited about turning Stamkos and Sergachev into McDonough and Gensel. That's just not good enough for me.
Yes, Sergachev is a bigger loss than I think some people think, with it now being all on Hedman's shoulders on that blue line, because there's zero help. Like, we talk about not a lot of depth in the bottom six for Tampa Bay. The blue line outside of Hedman is J.J. Moser, Ryan McDonough, Eric Cernak, Darren Radish, and Nick Perbix. That's not good. I struggle to solidify any of those guys as a top four defenseman on a good team. Like, they're 5-6 guys. Maybe like borderline number fours. But there's no top pairing guys. There's no high-end second pairing guys out beyond Victor Hedman. So the depth on this team is if one of these guys goes down at all this year, things get very bad. If Victor Hedman goes down, this blue line is non-existent. If a Gensel goes down, Hagel can step in or something, but you're banking on your 5 horses to get it done, and it's a scary situation to be in. But they're still good enough. They're again, any team with a Nikita Kucherov, a Victor Hedman, a Vasilevsky, a lot of after that doesn't really matter what else you have. You're going to be competitive. But when we're talking about competing with Montreal, or sorry, with Toronto and Boston and Florida and the top teams in the Metro, I think they're getting further and further away from those teams.
Do they have the best player at any position? Goalie, you would say, right?
Goalie and then maybe Kucherov as a winger. I mean, it's hard to not debate that he's the best winger in the league
Sure. Yeah.
right. So, but yeah, that
I
would be
think
it.
in the division, you would say it's between him and Pasternak and Kachuk.
Yeah.
But
and Vasilevsky, you put him up there with Hellebuck or Shesterkin or
100%.
Right. But they're at least in the conversation, and you can give Hedman some credit, and you could maybe put him in the conversation. But again, when there's guys like Cale Makar who exist, it's very hard now to put him in that conversation. But he's still in the mix of being an elite. He still is an elite defenseman for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, even just in the division, right? I think with McAvoy, who else is in this division? Why am I breaking? Yeah, Yeah, maybe it's really just maybe McAvoy. Yeah,
McAvoy, Morgan Riley.
Yeah, because it's not Morgan Riley.
No,
Let's be fucking
like,
for serious right now. Yeah. No, so maybe.
the best
All right, okay. You know what? That's fair. I think you can say they've got a. I mean, look, the truth of it is like, if nothing else, they've got Braden Point, which Boston doesn't have, right? Braden Point's better than fucking Elias Lindholm by a mile.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting thing because I think, again, the bones of this team are there to make the playoffs, but after that, it's Andre Vasilevsky wins the Conn Smythe, or they're not making it out of the second round. Like, I wouldn't want to play them in the first round. Let's be very clear. That's not, that's
still
not
a John
fun.
Cooper coach team that has a lot of experience winning in the postseason.
Right.
So you still don't want to face them at any point. But yeah, like we said, the main thing to note with Tampa Bay is the days of them running over teams and running away with this division are over. Like, there's enough question marks about the team, especially with the losses of Sergachev and Stamkos, that there's right to question them and whether they're going to be able to step into that top three this year and get back to where they used to be. So, speaking of the top three, first team in the top three, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Still
A
with
stable
Mitch Marner.
team.
Still with Mitch Marner somehow. I honestly did not expect him to still be here. After everything we heard at the draft and the way things went after the end of last season, I did not expect him to still be a part of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But here we are.
So here's the insane thing, okay? I have like a pick'em league for games that I do with a couple people in my family, my uncle, my sister, my dad, my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
And one of the tiebreakers is regulation wins. I picked Toronto to lead the league in regulation wins.
I don't hate it.
I think Craig Berube is going to do a lot for them. I think Chris Tanev is going to do a lot for them.
I think Anthony Stolar is just going to be good for them as well.
I still have to wonder what happens if William Nylander isn't a 100-point player. What happens with all this shit with Mitch Marner? Is Stolars and Joseph Woll enough? Is Oliver Ekman-Larsson good enough to be your second creative defenseman behind Morgan Riley, who is among the most boring offensive defensemen? Like, I don't like Max Domi. I don't love the forward depth on this team. Maybe Nick Robertson makes a big difference in the top nine.
Yeah, but we've been waiting for that for years. I mean, he's had a good preseason, but it seems like he does every year and then doesn't make the roster for some reason. So
Yeah, and maybe that changes, right? Maybe, with a new coach, he plays somewhere different. Maybe with all the shit going on with Mitch Marner, they try to dangle fucking whatever. I don't know. But, like, this is still fundamentally the Leafs playing with a roster where John Tavares and Mitch Marner are both UFAs this summer as of right now.
yeah, it is a very pivotal what happens next season for the Leafs
I
because
just,
John Tavares is not a Leaf next year. I don't see a world he comes
oh,
back.
he's going to sign an extension halfway through the season.
It's gonna have to be significant, like 6 or 7 million.
Yeah, it'll drop.
Yeah.
It'll drop.
I don't know. I think the big question mark is what happens with Mitch Marner because again,
Correct.
you're a team that can't afford to lose him for nothing, but you also can't afford to trade him and get a worse player back because of where you have to. You can't get picks and prospects back. You have to get roster players back we've talked about this in theoretical trades with the Ducks and getting guys like Troy Terry or Mason
Yep.
McTavish back. Those are the types of players you have to target to still be competitive and I don't know if they're going to be able to turn it around. Like that's going to be looming over them for the entire season. Now the good thing is usually players in their contract years have great seasons, and Mitch Marner had a good year. Just only played about 69 games last year, so I don't think Nylander has to be a 100-point player because a fully healthy season from Mitch Marner should mean that he's a 100-point player. And if Nylander then is an 80 to 90-point player, that's fine. I'm fine with that. Austin Matthews is going to be a 60-goal scorer because that just seems to be what he is on a consistent basis now, which is
Right.
just ridiculous. I like the additions. I really like Chris Tanev. I don't mind Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Like I think it's similar to the teams that have gone out. A lesser version of signing Shane Gostisbehere, essentially, right? Like to just bring in as a secondary option. It's still like you said, very legitimate concerns on whether it's enough because Morgan Riley isn't really the best offensive defenseman anyway, but he's kind of what you have to put on your top. Like Morgan Riley reminds me a lot of Cam Fowler and the way
Yeah.
they play, and like they're supposed to be offensive defensemen, but they really aren't offensive defensemen. Like the Cale Makars and the elite offensive defensemen in this league, they're just kind of a boring, lesser version of that. He's still a very good defenseman. I like Liljegren. I like Jake McCabe. I like the kind of Hakanpää Benoit is your 5, 6, 7th defenseman. I don't hate it. Stolarz is good to go with Wall, but like there's still the question marks of this team. The question marks of Mitch Marner as one, the depth on the forward group, and if whether Robinson or Matthew Nyes or Bobby McCann or whoever are going to be able to take steps forward. If Easton Cowan makes the team, like where's the rest of the scoring going to come from? And then the big question mark for the Leafs versus any of the other teams, the Tampa, Boston, Florida, is the goaltending. Is Joseph Wall, Anthony Stolarz, potentially Matt Murray going to do it for you and be able to put you in a competitive spot? I don't know. I mean, this team scores enough goals that usually that doesn't seem to matter. But when we get to playoff time, that's where things start to fall apart for them.
Yeah, I mean, look, more than anything, nothing matters until the playoffs. This is a team that is and should be expected to make the playoffs. You obviously want to have as good of a season as you can, and focusing on home ice and all that stuff is great. You're going to have to win on the road one way or the other. And, with a coach like Berube coming in and crack the whip and like really, it's probably not a great phrase, but like really like come down and like break heads and shit like that, right? Like he's coming in to like knock off the fun times, essentially, which is kind of, mileage may vary on how fair that is to Sheldon Keefe and what kind of coach he actually was. But he's going to come in, he's going to put in a defensive system, and he's going to get the most out of it. So there's a world in which it's all process over results because the results are going to be good enough to get them into the playoffs, and it's just about what do we do in April and May and June. And I also think there's a world where Austin Matthews wins the MVP and, Craig Berube wins the Jack Adams and Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz are good enough and this team wins the President's Trophy.
Yeah.
Mitch Marner has a contract year. William Nylander isn't maybe a 98-point player, but he's an 85-point player. John Tavares knows that he's playing for the opportunity to stay. He puts up a good year, right? I just, maybe Timothy Liljegren takes a jump. Maybe Nick Robertson takes a jump. Maybe just bringing in a good actual defenseman like Chris Tanev makes a big difference, right? Like I don't think the goaltending is good enough. There's questions about the forward depth. Beyond that, I like this defense group better than I liked the one they had last year. I think, like you said, Chris Tanev is a game changer for them because of his stability and consistency and profile. And I think Oliver Ekman-Larsson showed last year that he can be good enough with good teammates that he can still have an impact and make a difference at 5v5 at times.
Yeah.
Maybe he balances out your second power play unit, right? Like that kind of stuff. The question is ultimately going to be what do they do in the playoffs and if they get out of the first round. And as we saw 2 years ago, getting out of the first round alone isn't good enough. You've got to do more than that. So, I really do think there's a world where they win the division and they win the President's Trophy. This team, I don't think this team has ever won the division in the time where Matthews has been a superstar. Let me see.
No, because it would have been Tampa or Boston or Florida.
Yeah, so
they've been in the mix, but yeah, they definitely haven't got there.
2021, they finished first, but I think that was the Canada year. That doesn't count.
Yeah, definitely does not count.
Yeah, that was the Canadian League. Yeah, second, third. Yeah. So yeah, I think I kind of want them to win the division.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be really cool, really fun. I think
they're in a good spot. Like they're primed for it because I do have my concerns with Tampa and then with the next team we're going to talk about here. I think it'll really be between Florida and Toronto fighting for it. So we got Boston up next, and Boston. I would have said beforehand it would have been Buffalo and Detroit were the most interesting teams, the ones I was most interested in talking about. I think Boston is probably in that mix now, and a lot of it has to do with the Jeremy Swayman situation and whether he's going to sign or not, because that has a lot of weight in whether they're successful or not. Because beyond Swayman, no more Allmark. So you have Swayman Allmark last year, and now you were down to Swayman, and now you're down to Jonas Korpisalo.
Yeah.
And the Swayman situation is ridiculous because there's now a very real possibility that he's traded and he doesn't play in Boston. And what do you do at that point? Like this team was already had concerns. Like they lost a lot of their depth scoring. They lost JVR. They lost Danton Heinen. They lost Jake DeBrusk. They didn't do anything really to replace that other than adding Elias Lindholm, which in a nutshell, like if you didn't count everything else out, like I think it's a decent move for them. Like they needed a player who can be a top 6 center for them. They just didn't have that. He's not your elite first line center that you would hope for, but he's definitely better than Charlie Coyle. So you've got something there. Like I think Elias Lindholm playing with David Pastrnak and Pavel Zacha, he'll do good. He'll do good enough. He's done well in that type of situation before playing with Jonathan Huberdeau, so I don't, or not Jonathan Huberdeau, sorry, Johnny Gaudreau and Brady and Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk when he was at his best in Calgary. So I don't hate it, but the depth beyond that is Brad Marchand on a second line with Charlie Coyle and Morgan Geekie, and then they run into the same situation that Tampa's in, is that bottom 6 is a bunch of guys, right? Like Boston, just like Pittsburgh, seems to always put together a better bunch of guys than other teams that seem to just work in their system, but I don't have a lot of faith in it. Yeah, man, it hinges a lot on Swayman, and their success hinges a lot on Swayman this year for a good reason, because this team with Jeremy Swayman is a playoff team. This team with Jonas Korpisalo as their starting goaltender is not a playoff team.
No, not at all. I mean, look, I like the Zadorov signing. I like the Lindholm signing. I'm not a huge fan of the Lindholm contract, but the player makes sense. I think if you're them, you have to play Marchand and Pasternak with Lindholm, and you basically hope that you can recreate the Kachuk, Gaudreau, Lindholm line. And instead of an elite creator like Gaudreau, you get an elite finisher, and then you have, two of the three or four best pest rat top six top line forwards that the game has seen in 15 years. And that's cool, but then okay, now my second line is Pavel Zacha and Connor Geekie and Charlie Coyle.
Yeah.
Like, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens, because I don't think you have the luxury of playing those three guys together.
No.
I think you have to put one of them on your second line, but I also don't know if you can afford to not play them together and just win those minutes every night. And I hate that strategy. I am not a fan of all my eggs in one basket, but I don't know that they have another option. And for the record,
they don't have a Hagel Sorelli as their second line, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And Pavel Zacha last year, or Charlie Coyle was their second line center last year. Connor Geekie, or Morgan Geekie, was a third line center for them. So, Charlie Coyle played really, really well in the minutes he played for them last year. I think he had a career high in points. Mm-hmm. But you can't count on that to happen again. And everything is even weirder now because you don't have fucking the best goaltending tandem in the league.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild to go from all Mark Swayman to potentially none of them in
fucking
one season.
Yeah, Korpisalo, Bussy. And obviously, if they were to trade Jeremy Swayman, they would almost certainly go out and get a goalie in that trade or another one, right?
Yeah.
But you keep, Markstrom's gone. Maybe you get Gibson, but I don't know that you're always. I don't think you're overly excited to replace Jeremy Swayman with John Gibson. Thatcher Demko might not play this year, and there's no guarantee he's ever going to go back. He was probably the best available goalie left, and he's a completely unknown right now. Then you've got other teams that need goalies. This whole thing is crazy.
You get Philip Gustafsson back.
Maybe do you go out and get Binnington? Maybe. You know what I mean? I don't know what you do here. So they have to figure out really quick what's going on with this Swayman deal, and they have to figure out who their goalie is for this year, because it cannot be Korpisalo. I don't care how good he starts off this year. He cannot be your starting goaltender for this team when it gets to... He can't be the number one goalie when it gets to January. You need to have a real goalie at that point.
Yeah, man, I don't know. That's their success for sure hinges on just having the availability of Jeremy Swayman. They're a good enough team and a good enough coach team that they're in a similar boat to me as Tampa, that the depth is an issue for sure, but there's enough top end elite talent that they can
I like
make
their
things
top
work.
four more.
Their top four defensemen more than Tampa? Oh yeah, for
sure.
For sure. Yeah. I think Hedman's the best defenseman, but I think when you bring the whole top four, I actually really like Boston's defense. I don't think I have a problem with it. I like Mason Lohrei. I like the Zadorov signing. Lindholm, McAvoy. It's good enough. It's good enough to make a difference for them. But
dude, Charlie McAvoy is a legitimate Norris contender, and Hampus Lindholm was a Norris vote receiver one year, a legitimate threat one year.
Yeah.
And they still have Brandon Carlo, who is still the perfect second pair defenseman. Mm-hmm. It's going to be about who plays with Nikita Zadorov, how they balance that all out. But this team is in a better spot than not, if for no other reason than they do still have Pasternak and a great top four.
Yeah.
But they got to figure this Swayman shit out, man.
Yeah, that's the main thing for them right now, and I don't. I mean, they can't even. They have $8.5 million in cap space. They don't have a lot to play with. Like all of that essentially is earmarked for Swayman.
Right.
If he wants more than 8.5, then he's not getting it in Boston unless they make a corresponding move, and they're really not in a position to move players out at this point because the depth isn't there. So, I don't. I don't know.
And neither are the salaries for that matter. Like if you look, they can move Zadorov, they can move Lindholm, but they just signed him. They're not going to. Charlie Coyle has modified no trade. Brad Marchand has modified no trades. They're not trading him.
They signed Peak, so you're not moving him. So like it really comes down to like if you'd be moving Brandon Carlo out, which I'm sure they don't want to do, but that would be
you definitely don't want to do.
That would be the guy you move out at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough situation for them. To still be dealing with this at this point in the season is not good news for them. Or at this point, in the off season, so close to the start of the regular season. I do see the Leafs leapfrogging them, even with Swayman. Part of the Bruins. I think the Leafs are going to be the team that pushes the Panthers this year. And speaking of the Panthers, for me, this really could, with all the question marks of the other teams, feels like the year where they could kind of just run away with this division. And it's tough to say that in a division that's so close with so many good teams, but with all the question marks of the other teams, there's a lot less question marks surrounding the Florida Panthers here. Sam Reinhart's still there, Kachuk's still there, Barkov, Verhaeghe, Bennett, all the guys that made a difference for the Florida Panthers are still there. The only significant loss, I guess, is Brandon Montour for them, and the hope is that Aaron Ekblad is healthy enough now and can get back to being power play one quarterback, because he's proven he can do that in the past. So I don't think it's a bad pivot to try and shift him back into that role. And even if it doesn't work, they do have Gustav Forsling, who's proven that he can take that role if needed. So I like them enough, and I think there's a lot less question marks about them to say that they are certainly the front runner to win this division again.
Yeah, I think the only part of that I would contend with is the Sergei Bobrovsky part of it all.
Yeah.
But
that was my question mark for them last year, and then he backstopped them to a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, he was good last year for them. But, he had a couple rough years there. And, if you want to say Paul Maurice is there and Paul Maurice is going to help fix that, I'm certainly open to that conversation. Here we go. So goals saved above expected, negative 13.46, negative 9.97, positive 12.14, positive 2.92, positive 15.76. He has had as many disastrous seasons as great seasons. Now, with that being said, Paul Maurice, the team in front of him, certainly better than it was at certain points in the early tenure he was there. He's 36 years old. He's played a ton of fucking games. He has to have played 100 games by now. 500 games by now. Yeah, he's played 700 games in the regular season. The wheels could fall off of him at any point. He could get an injury at any point. The thing I guess you say for them is they have Spencer Knight, who was at one point one of the top goaltending prospects in the world. He has had some issues. I think it was OCD, but he was in the player assistance for mental health and addiction kind of stuff, and I believe it was mental health. I believe he had really bad OCD. But the skill is there with Spencer Knight, right? The pedigree and the talent is obviously there, and it's just about who he is now as a player, where he's at, as far as, mentally and emotionally and just that kind of stuff. So I guess, yeah, for all the reasons, this is the next, like, Verhage and Bennett are both UFAs at the end of this year, so this feels like a year for them to definitely make another push, and make another meaningful run at it. Like, everybody's there, but, like, yeah, they probably should win the division. Alexander Barkov, Matthew Tkachuk are still two of the best in the league, and if nothing else, we've seen them fucking be incredible. Like, I love Anton Lundell, Sam Reinhart. Whatever. I don't think he
Paid him
hits
more
40 goals.
than he should have, but he's still a very good player.
I don't think Sam Reinhart hits 40 goals this year, so I think that'll be a real problem for them. Like,
Yeah, yeah. There's nobody else to take that. I mean, you would. The hope is that Matthew Tkachuk scores more than 26, right? Like
yes,
that's the hope because he had back-to-back 40-goal seasons before that. So um, I think if you get Reinhardt coming back down to mid-30s and Tkachuk jumping up to 30 to 40, then I think you're okay. But yeah, you still need goals from somewhere else, right? You still need to make that up, the difference there. So
yeah. So I think, like you said, I get why you would say this is the favorite to win the division. Um, but I do think there are some red flags here that could certainly be a problem for this team. And
hmm
if this team has a bad year, I don't think it's going to be hard to figure out why.
yeah, for sure. I mean, the forward depth by not like it's not even close. The forward depth of this team is the best in the division. Like when you think you roll a first line out of Reinhardt, Barkov, or Hagee, a second line of Kachuk, Bennett, Rodriguez, and the third line of Luosterainen, Lindell, Mackey, Samoskevich. Very solid. I even like the fourth line of AJ Greer, Jesper Bockquist, and Thomas Nosek. I like the additions of Greer and Nosek to this team. I think it provides some good depth to them and a good fourth line that they can roll out there. And guys, in Nosek's case, that they can bump up the lineup if they have to. Samoskevich is going to be an interesting one for them to see what he can do because he was really, really good in the AHL last year. Played 7 games for Florida. Was pointless, but again, he's playing down in the lineup, so that will be an interesting one. That could be where some of the goals get made up. The fall off from Reinhardt if Samoskevich, because he's the former first round pick, can get 10 to 15 even. I think that will help. The question marks for me come on the blue line. Obviously, there's question marks about goaltending, but I think Bobrovsky proved enough last year. Knight has enough potential that I'm at least a little bit more confident in their goaltending than other teams. But no Ekman Larson, no Montour, putting a lot of pressure on Aaron Ekblad to go back to being the guy. So I think there's some question marks there. Then outside of Forsling and Ekblad, it's Mikula, Kulikov, Schmidt, and Bockwist. It's not great, right? So there are some holes there. So it'll be interesting to see how that blue line holds up this year because losing Montour for sure is a big loss. Losing Ekman Larson, when you take it into consideration the players that are there now, I think is a decent enough loss that there'll be some question marks about this blue line early on.
This is a team that is in a really interesting place because if I could pick one team to go out and make a Tampa Bay style, add a young, just pay a huge price and add a young guy under cost control to this team, it would be them, right? But they don't have any of their first 3 picks this year. They don't have a third round pick next year. They don't have any notably great prospects. God, man, this team just could really use a really good 22, 23-year-old player. Like, obviously, every team can use one, but you
Yeah,
know what I mean?
they need
Like,
a 22, 23-year-old young defenseman who could play on the power play really badly. They need that. I don't know where they're going to get that, but they could really use that.
yeah, 100%. So it's just they are a team I would really like to see be aggressive this year, leading up to the deadline and maybe even earlier than that, trying to make something happen and really add a meaningful piece to the back end.
All right, so that's it for the Atlantic. We got to do our predictions on where you think these teams are going to finish. You want to head it off? Go first, starting from bottom to top.
So I will go Montreal, Buffalo. Ottawa. You know what? I'll go Montreal, Buffalo, Detroit, Ottawa, Tampa, Boston, Florida, Toronto.
You know what I hate is that we talked ourselves in the Senators, and we're gonna come back here at the end of the season and be like, "What the fuck were we thinking?" But we talked ourselves in the
100%.
Senators to actually being somewhat good because I also have them moving up. I got, I this might be the same as yours, but I've got Montreal, Buffalo, or yeah, no, what do I want to do? Montreal, Detroit, Buffalo, Ottawa, Boston, Tampa, Florida, Florida, Toronto.
Montreal, Detroit, Buffalo, Ottawa, Boston.
Boston, Tampa, Florida, Toronto.
Boy. And then Detroit. It hurts my soul to have Detroit fucking that far out of it. But I think they're going to end up being that far out of it. I do not like that goaltending.
Yeah, just
And
a
their
lot of
blue line is
concerns.
not dynamic enough.
No. All right, we got one division left, and we're gonna
Lego.
have to rip through it because we're already an hour and a half in here.
Oh,
But
whatever.
we start off with an easy one in the San Jose Sharks. Um, no question that they were likely going to be the bottom team in this division again. The only team close to them last year was the Ducks, and it would be a monumental failure for the Ducks to fall 12 points and fall below the Sharks. For this upcoming season, the Sharks' additions are essentially just younger players. Celebrini's going to play. Will Smith's going to play. They bring in Tyler Toffoli and Alexander Wenberg and Barclay Goodrow and Luke. I don't know, Luke Kunin was there last year. So they bring in some decent players. Cody Ceci as well.
Jake Wallman.
Yep, Askarov, who won't start the season because I believe he's injured, but he will come in at later on. So, I mean, they will be better for sure, which I think is easy to say when they finished with 47 points last year, and only 19 wins. They should be better. They'll be exciting to watch because you'll be watching for Celebrini and you'll be watching for Will Smith and seeing what William Eklund can do with them. But they're going to be hard times for the Sharks. I think it's safe to say they're going to finish bottom in this division and they're going to benefit from another top 3 pick likely heading into next year.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. But I'll tell you what, man. Toffoli, Celebrini, and Eklund Smith. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. No,
I'm
it certainly is. They're
I'm
to be fun to
not
watch just for that.
they they have a young Henry Thrun. It doesn't seem like what's his name? Is gonna make the Sam Dickinson is gonna make the roster.
Oh yeah, he already got sent back, so
Okay.
he's
Yeah.
not making it.
Um, no, I think that back end is pretty brutal. Um, Wallman will help, CC will help. Like again, like they're just players who know how to play hockey. Like it'll be helpful, but like it's not good. The goaltending's gonna be a disaster. Like this is a team that is looking to add one more player, like you said. Like I have a hard time thinking that they don't finish as the worst team in the league. I think uh, you can say maybe Columbus and Chicago are the only teams that you could see finishing below them. Like obviously the Ducks could finish below them, but like you said, if that happens, then something went very wrong in Anaheim,
Yeah,
and we have huge problems.
yeah. I mean, the Sharks are at a stage where this is expected. They're going to be bad, but there's at least some positives to look forward to. And this is where the Ducks were a few years ago. It's the young players on this team. It's Celebrini, it's Will Smith, it's William Eklund, it's Askarov. It's seeing what you get from these guys. Um, in 3 to 4 of them in their first season in a Sharks uniform. So there'll be some optimism in that case. But as it did with us, that will die out after about 30 or 40 games when things are bleak and you've won maybe 10 of those games if you're lucky and things aren't looking so great. So yeah, it'll be another tough season for the Sharks, but they're at the very start of their rebuild, so it is to be expected. We're skipping Anaheim here, right? Obviously.
Yeah, I mean, do you have and well, let me ask it this. Let's do this to Anaheim. Where do you think Anaheim finishes?
Somewhere between where they did last year, which was eighth and fifth, between 5 and 8. Just in the mix with the Flames and Seattle.
Yeah.
I just
I
think
think
they
they
didn't
should
do enough.
finish ahead of Calgary.
I think so too. I think it'll be more of a battle. Like Calgary, I think will be worse than they were last year. There'll be more of a battle with Seattle, and I don't think Seattle's roster is significantly better than Anaheim's. Um,
I don't think it has as much upside.
no, it doesn't. Um, I think there's a lot of there's a potential for Anaheim to finish a lot higher than Seattle. Just that things have to go right for the Ducks. They need to start first with allowing a lot less goals against. Seattle's off to a better start than allowing 60 less goals than the Ducks did last year. Both teams struggle to score goals, but I don't know. I think they'll be in the mix with Seattle for sure. But to think, can they leapfrog the Golden Knights, the Kings, the Oilers, the Canucks? That's a bit tougher of a question. So I think optimistically, you finish fifth. It's a good year. Make some improvements, some steps forward, and then you start hopefully actually adding to this roster for next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're Seattle, what you're basically hoping is that you see proof that Matty Beniers is a borderline number one center. I think you want him to be your number one center. I think bringing in Chandler Stevenson is a sign that like we think he can be,
Mm-hmm.
because you're basically just bulking up the middle six at that point. I mean, there is certainly a world where Matty Beniers and Shane Wright both look like legit top six centers, and they're both high floor guys that make this team deep down the middle, right? Like you could certainly do worse than Beniers, Wright, Stevenson, Gord in terms of what these guys could all be. But Yanni Gord's gonna be a UFA at the end of this year. It's gonna be interesting to see if they extend him. If they're out of it fast, he's a player that a lot of teams would be really excited about adding, especially at only $5 million a year. Like, if I'm Seattle, like, yeah, man, like, I'm just looking at this. Like, they spent all that money on Stevenson and all that money on Brandon Montour, and they still have Philip fucking Grubauer as their goalie.
Yeah, Seattle is like the most just just a bunch of guys roster I've ever seen. Like it really is just a
It,
bunch of guys. It's and like they're deep. They're deep. Like they have a lot of guys, but it's not the upside's not really there, right? Like
is Montour and Stevenson their super poor man's version of Minnesota, adding Sutter and Parise?
yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
And then
definitely
I
super
mean,
poor
because
man's
look, if Matty
version, but
Beniers is Mikko Koivu, you're fucking ecstatic.
yeah, I don't know what Matty Beniers is yet. I'm very concerned that it was a down draft year and he's not much more than like an Elias Lindholm type player, right? Like he needs better
Is he
players around him to put
here's
up the points.
who was better at their peak, Elias Lindholm or Ryan Kessler?
Kessler.
Okay, if Matty Beniers is Ryan Kessler, is that good enough?
I don't think so for right now for what Seattle has because I don't think Seattle's going to be bad enough because they have a decent enough roster that they're not going to be bad enough to get a high pick. Yeah, I mean the hope is I don't think he's a center, but the hope is Berkeley Caton comes in and he's a number one center, and Beniers can be your number
Or
two.
a number one right wing, right?
Yeah, yeah, or some just like Beniers needs. I like him
Oh, he's
as
a
a
left
player.
shot. I thought he was a right
I
shot.
like Beniers as a player, but I think he needs like a superstar to play with to be better. You know what I mean? Like he is not
Right.
going to be the guy that puts up 80 points and drives play for the Kraken. He's just not going to be that guy. Beyond
Beniers,
that,
Burakovsky, and Bjorkstrand, the triple B line.
like
That's not bad.
the team is very deep. I
Eli
like what they have. Like
Tolman.
their depth of their starting 12 is very good. Like you've got
Yeah.
McCann, Beniers, Bjorkstrand, Burakovsky, Stevenson, Tolman, and Schwartz right. Like Schwartz right, Eberle as a third line is very good, and even
Yeah.
the fourth line is. You get like right now, Yanni Gourde is potentially your fourth line center to go with Brandon Tanev and Ty Cartier. It's not bad. Like I like it. I can see why they're a tough team to play against, but like they just seem like there's no upside there. They're not going to get significantly better because all of these guys they have, we know what they are, other than Matty Beniers and Shane Wright, I guess, right? Like that's it. And I don't know if Shane Wright. He's looked okay. He's looked better, but like they would need Shane Wright to or Matty Beniers to turn into a first line center, or at least Matty Beniers to stay a 50-point guy, and Shane Wright to also become a similar guy like that, and be like a 50 to 60-point guy. Um, I just don't know. Like the blue line is good again. Like I really like Vince Dunn. Adam Larson's a good pairing for him. I think Brandon Montour is a good fit for this team, and you pair him with Jamie Alexiak, that really works. And even the bottom pairing of Riker Evans and Will Borgen is good. But again, it's just like a bunch of guys, man. Like there's just like
Yeah.
there's no major upside here. Is like they are gonna be a difficult team to play against on certain nights. They are going to punish teams, but they're still going to struggle to score a lot of goals because there's just no guy on this team. There's no difference maker, right? Like that's the thing I think Seattle's going to run into, and what they're going to have to look at over the next couple of years. They don't have the cap space to do it, but they're going to have to figure out somehow to get a superstar on this team. And I'm sure they hope it's Berkeley Catton, but right now they don't have it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly it. They suffer from a lack of explosive offensive potential at anywhere on their roster. I like Brandon Montour. I think he's a very creative offensive player from the back end, but I don't think anyone's under any um, misconceptions that he was not a huge benefactor of the fact that the team last year that he was on in Florida and that has been on for a few years now was so loaded up front with forward talent, right? He was the second option behind Aaron Ekblad, even as a right-handed defenseman. He's going to be asked to be their top right-handed defensive as far as creating offense. Like, you don't pay him all that money and then fucking not put him on your first power play. Like, he's going to be asked to do a lot of work on this roster, and you know maybe he's able to, but I don't know that I'm overly excited about having to ask him to be such a major contributor on this team. And then you get into we haven't even really talked about goalie other than me shitting on Philip Grubauer. Like he's not enough. And
Joey
he's making
Daccord
almost
was their guy last year, and I don't even know. I don't know enough about him to think that he can do it again. Like I just don't. Other
well,
than
he's 28 already. Like
he's got like a decent situation in front of him in like the players and the not just the defenders.
Yeah,
but
but
the
again,
actual
but here's
team,
the other
but,
thing,
like,
right? Like, how optimistic are we that Dan Bilesma is going to be a good coach?
yeah,
Which he was good in Pittsburgh for a minute, and he was fine in Buffalo, but everybody's at best fine in Buffalo.
yeah. Like, how much
You know
of this
he
team's ability to win games last year and be decent around 500 is the fact that Dave Haxtell just played very defensive, and this team under Dan Bilesma is not going to be. They're not going to all of a sudden under a new coach score significantly more goals. So are they just going to they can't be better than they were defensively last year. So again, like I struggle to see where things get better for Seattle.
Yeah, but like you said, their floor is high enough that they're not going to get the benefit of a great pick. Like they really got to hope Berkeley
Yep.
Catton is the dude they think he is.
Yeah, or you somehow, again,
Win the
like,
lottery.
you can't even go out in free agency because you're locked into a lot of these guys. You know, somehow maybe they're the ones who swing a Mitch Marner trade, right? But then how do you make that work with Toronto? Because again, you don't have like the pieces that are interesting enough for them to want to bring in.
Right.
So it's a tough situation for them. Again, like yeah, they're a good enough team to just be around the mix, but they won't be in a playoff spot or fighting for a playoff spot. They just don't have enough upside, I think, to do it.
Would you do Yanni Gord, Jamie Oleksiak, and Berkeley Catton for Mitch Marner?
Probably not. No.
From whose side?
Toronto, but again, it's so tough to judge. Like, they might not have a lot of offers out there. Like, I think if you're Toronto, you're hoping to get like a decent player back that can help you now because they're going to be good enough. Like, you need another top six.
Well,
forward
Yanni
coming in.
Gordon.
Yeah,
Yanni
but like,
Gordon's a good middle six center.
he is, but
Jamie Oleksiak is a fine second pair defender. Like, and then basically what you're doing is you're being like, well, in 2 years, Berkeley Catton comes in on his ELC and he's a difference maker.
yeah, I don't hate it
I don't
for
know.
sure. Like, if you're not going to get a top six forward in return, then getting a guy who can become that in a couple of years is like probably the next best option to go with. But yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah, no.
it's a tough one to judge.
Yeah, I mean, Andre Burakovsky hasn't been super great since he got there, which is fine. He left Colorado, which was, one of the most explosive offensive teams. Like, yeah, he had 16 points in 49 games last year. Like, he's not been good, you know? 13 and 26 in 49 games the year before is better, but they signed him off a career 61-point season and he only had 22 goals at 26. Like he's not going to become a 70-point player. He's probably not even going to be a 60-point player ever again. I don't know, man. Seattle seems like they're just bound. Like they seem like Buffalo. Like, is that right? Or like maybe like Detroit, where you're just like, yeah, like I like some of these players, but none of them make a big enough difference.
Yeah, for sure.
Or Detroit a couple years ago, I guess.
Yeah,
Maybe is a better way to say it.
yeah, they just they feel weird to me. They just feel like they're in this position that no other team is. That there's just like they have so many. It's such a bad way to explanation when I say they just have so many guys, but like they just have so many guys. We know what they are. Like there's no upside there. There's no Bjorkstrand's gonna score 40. Like you know what I mean? Like there's just no guy.
Dude, they
who's
were
gonna
the
move
most.
needle.
You were not kidding. They were the most nothing fucking happened while we were on the ice ass team. Expected goals for 2.47. Expected goals against 2.41. Actual goals for 2.16. Actual goals against 2.17.
Yeah.
Like they were the most 50-50 ass team. Maybe bringing in Montour on the power play and having him and Vince Dunn either together or on separate power plays makes. But fucking A, man, they're gonna finish fifth.
It should, but yeah, like
They're gonna finish fifth.
they're just not. They're not bad, but they're not good, right? Like they are just that. That's what they are.
Good lord.
Next team we have was team we finished. All right, and moving on to the Calgary Flames. Didn't finish much higher than the Kraken. Well, even on points, I guess, just higher on wins, regulation overtime wins last year. I think with the Flames, I think you and me both kind of agreed with this off air. They feel like the team that could fall the furthest from where they were last year. Not a ton of subtraction necessarily. Like they lost Mangiapane, they lost Hannafin. They lost Lindholm, they lost Tanev. Like, again, they are significant names. A few of them only played a handful of games and were traded out at the deadline, so they did lose them for the second half of the season. Just not a lot of names brought in to replace those guys, if anything at all. They brought in Anthony Mantha. They brought in Jake Bean, Tyson Berry. They did lose Jacob Markstrom, who I didn't even mention as well, and they've got Dustin Wolf and Dan Vladar. So it's more, this team is significantly worse just by the fact that they lost a significant portion of their core and did nothing to replace them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to look at it is they lost all of the players who can give them potential to have an impact on a nightly basis and replace them either with, you know, middling players or players with who are young and have a need to grow. But I mean, if you look at like, you know, I guess the thing that's important to remember with this team is that the majority of, I don't want to say it. Let me say it this way. Their rebuild is just fucking starting.
Yeah, it's very beginning, yeah.
That is the most important part of this is this roster is significantly older than you would expect for a team that is going to be as bad as they're going to be. And there just isn't really a lot of room on this team for upside. They were only better than the Ducks and the Sharks in terms of expected goals for percentage last year. They were only better than the Ducks and Sharks in terms of actual goals for percentage. I just, this is a team that should be pretty fucking bad. I really don't see what about this team would give you reason to think they're going to be very good other than, they still have Mackenzie Weegar, they still have Rasmus Anderson, but both of those guys seem to be guys people are going to be interested in. I would imagine.
At the very least, Rasmus Anderson with the
I would
contract
imagine he gets moved. Yeah.
Weegar's a little tougher with the length he has. Like, it's not for what he is. 6.625 isn't bad. I think he's worth it. But it's the fact that he's got like 6 or 7 more years left of that.
Yeah,
he's 30.
Yeah.
So that's the tough part for him.
It's brutal, and there's just not a lot here to like be excited about. Like, you like Backlund, you like Huberdeau, depending on whatever Jonathan Huberdeau is at this point, right? I don't really think anybody can say with any amount of certainty that they have a firm grasp on what Jonathan Huberdeau is. But I mean, he still put up 40 assists last year. The problem is there's nobody really left on the roster to score goals, except I guess for fucking Mackenzie Weegar.
There's not any consistent goal scorers. Like,
no.
Kuzmenko could be a 20 to 30 goal scorer, but you don't know. Anthony Mantha as well. I think Blake Coleman's hit it before. Sharon Govich has been good for Calgary, but they're not like locks for doing that. The team's in a decent spot. It's just a weird rebuild because you do have some of those names still there. Like, they are certainly at the beginning of their rebuild, but Dustin Wolf is a good young goaltender that if I was beginning a rebuild, I wouldn't mind having him as the first guy to kind of rely on to maybe be the transition piece. And it's not a bad thing to have the first piece of your rebuild be the goaltender, where you can maybe give him a little bit more time to be ready. Then obviously they added Zane Perrick in the last draft, which was a great addition for them. And they've got 3 firsts and 2 seconds heading into next year's draft. 2 firsts in 2026 as well. So they've got the draft picks, and like Rasmus Anderson should fetch them something nice. There's a chance you could potentially move Andrei Kuzmenko because he's an unrestricted free agent and retain a little bit of that. I think there are teams, I don't know if they would do it, but there are teams who could be interested in Michael Backlund, whether it's this year or next year. Anthony Mantha, unrestricted free agent, they would probably deal him at the deadline. So the only ones you're really locked into for a decent amount of time are Sharon Govich, Huberdeau, Kadri, and I guess Blake Coleman, but even then he's only got 3 years left for forward. And then on defense, it's really just Mackenzie Weegar. He's the only one that's locked in longer than the next 2 years. So it's not an awful spot to be in. You're really locked into 4 long-term contracts. The Huberdeau one is tough. The Kadri one is very tough because it's surprising. He's 34. He's 3 years older than Huberdeau, which is wild. Those are going to be tough ones, but when you're this bad, I don't think it's going to come back to bite them necessarily. Maybe the tail end of all these contracts are going to be a little rough, but I do think Weegar is one you could possibly move. Huberdeau and Kadri are going to be the tougher ones, but that's $17.5 million of cap space that most teams who are starting a rebuild have one or two bad contracts on their books, so it's not an awful spot to be, but they'll be bad. They'll be bad this year. Even a Huberdeau resurgence, I don't think is going to make them finish any higher than 7th. I like Dustin Wolf, but I do not trust a Dustin Wolf, Dan Vladar goaltending duo. Losing Jacob Markstrom is huge for them. Elias Lindholm's a huge loss. Like they just lose some really valuable pieces. Chris Tanev on the blue line. They don't have anybody to take up that mantle for them. It's going to mean a lot more minutes for Weegar and Anderson, and how does that impact them in their production this year? So I don't know. They'll be an interesting team to watch. They've got some good young players. Coronado that's making his way into the roster. Jacob Peltier. So they have some fun players to watch. Karnazari had a good year last year, but it's just not enough. I think the teams in front of them, like we talked about this with Seattle, is I don't think Seattle's a great team, but they're just like, they have a lot of depth. There's just a bunch of guys on that team that are quality NHL players. The Flames lack that, and I think you could argue the Flames could finish above the Ducks, but the Ducks definitely have a higher upside. So there's
for sure. I mean, look, like it's hard for me to think the Ducks shouldn't beat Calgary in the standings. I really think if the Ducks finish behind Calgary, either, someone is winning a major award like a Norris or a Hart or something like that, or everybody on the Ducks got hurt for 6 months.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh yeah, like everybody got hurt. And there's literally nobody to play, so they're icing an ECHL team. I just don't see for Calgary how you're looking at this and saying the next 3 or 4 years are going to be brutal. And maybe you hope, by that point, you've got Dustin Wolf looking like a legitimate number one. You've got Zane Parik looking like a legitimate number one. Igor Sharangovich, like he's already 26, so I don't think you're looking at him as being somebody you're overly excited about becoming a big part.
Pospisil, Coronado, those guys that you hope can...
Yeah, I mean, they spent money on Ryan Lomberg in free agency this summer. Like, they seem to know where they're at.
Yeah. And
it's just going to be... I would say this, of all the parts of last year for this team to improve on coming this way, I think the thing they need to improve on the most is getting the most out of these trades. Yeah. They're going to be able to move Rasmus Anderson. He makes $4.5 million. They can retain.
It'll be significant. They could get a significant price for him because there'll be a lot of interest
they should,
in a player like him.
The question is are they? Because last year they did not get anywhere near the returns for the players that they should have. Even in the summer with Jacob Markstrom and Jersey being against the wall, they got Kevin Ball and a first-round pick. That's not enough.
No.
And, there's a lot about it that just looks like Calgary's fucked. And, I think Calgary is going to make a pretty strong push for the worst team in the league. I have a hard time seeing them finish outside of the bottom 3.
I just think the tough thing for them, it's a long way to fall. When we talk about comparing them with Anaheim or any of those bottom teams, they were 22 points above the Ducks. Now they definitely, the amount of losses they had specifically in net as well, it's easy to see them fall that far. The thing that I think could hurt them in this rebuild is they still have a decent enough players on the team that they might have stretches where they play well if they get good goaltending, that it could take them out of that bottom 5, right? Like, they're not worse than San Jose. I don't think they're worse than Chicago. I think Columbus is worse. You can argue, I think Utah is going to be better this year, but the Ducks are still in that conversation. There's a lot of ground to be made up on the eastern side of things. Like, Montreal could be down there still, but I think the thing that could hurt them in this rebuild is they still have enough talent that they could go on a little bit of a run that takes them out of that bottom 5. They're still going to be a bottom 10 team by no means.
Here's the thing for me. I don't necessarily see them having enough talent to win 10 and 12, 10 and 13, right? Like, because here's the thing. Last year, just against the Pacific, they went 500. They went 13, 12, and 1. The Ducks are going to be able to take a step forward. Like, they shouldn't finish with that good of a record just in division alone. They went 11, 12, and 1 against the Central, and they were 9, 6, and 1 against the Atlantic. Like, I don't see a world in which they have better than a 500 record against any one division, which last year, they kind of were able to do a little bit better. Really only against the Atlantic. So Calgary basically just picked on the Atlantic division.
I think we're probably looking at like around 70 to 75 points at best.
I think that's right.
Which puts them bottom 5, right? So
I don't think that they will be as bad as San Jose or Anaheim were last year, but I think both of those teams will take steps forward and Calgary will come down enough.
Yep. Definitely, they're an easy 6 or 7 in this division, and the only either 6th or 7th really just depends on Anaheim and their progression more than anything, and if they can take steps to move in front of them. I think the Ducks should and can, but it is still a lot of ground to be made up over 1 year, right? So with not a lot of addition for Anaheim and the hope that the kids take steps forward, and a lot of subtraction for Calgary. So you're almost banking on Calgary being a lot worse and the Ducks just being a little bit better, that it makes up the difference.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, Calgary didn't win a single shootout last year.
Jeez.
They went 32 regulation wins, 38 6 overtime wins, and they had 4 shootout losses. They did not win a single game in shootout. So, like, maybe you say, that's the part of it. But again, they had a negative goal differential. They were minus 18 last year, which was only 1 goal better than Seattle. I mean, them and Seattle were pretty similar. And all of their good players are gone, and all of Seattle's good players are still there.
Yeah.
Again, I just think Seattle's floor is so much higher than Calgary's that I have a hard time seeing.
Oh, Seattle finishes above them for sure. Yeah, but just for that very reason, that I can't see Seattle being worse than 81 points last year because they made some decent additions. It's just the ceiling for Seattle is
right, for sure,
not much higher than they were last year, right? Like, there's a lot of ground to be made up between the teams in front of them, including the next team here, the Golden Knights, and it's really like a top 4, I think, still for the Pacific Division. It's the Knights, the Kings, the Oilers, and the Canucks. Vegas, you just know, are going to be one of those teams that stick around. They do have some losses from last year for sure. So, the I don't want to say they're ever really a powerhouse, but the days of them being kind of hailed as the front runners in this division, I think, are over for now. Losing Jonathan Marchessault is huge. It's a major loss for them. And off the top of my head, I obviously have to look, so I could be way off here. But I don't think they did much to replace him, right?
Well, the thing that you maybe want to say that they did that provides them with the most upside is they did trade for Alexander Holtz.
Oh yeah, and they get a full season of Thomas Hertl as well. So.
Right. So, I don't think Mark Stone is hurt yet, right? And I don't mean to be coy in that way. Like, I'm not trying to be funny, but like, he's not hurt yet. So at least as of now, you can say we have a full season ahead of us. I mean, that's not true, but you can say it. We have a full season ahead of us of Mark Stone. I think they probably have one of the deepest center groups in the league as far as Carlson, Hertl, Eichel. There's just so much. Their strengths are strong, and their question marks are not nothing. Their wing depth is questionable, and their goaltending is suspect, in my opinion. I'm not super sold on Adin Hill and Ilya Samsonov.
Not at all. Yeah, not at all. I listen. Hill deserves to be the starter for what he's done for that team, but I'm not sold on it by any means. I think Logan Thompson was really good for them. I don't trust Ilya Samsonov at all because even in a good team in Toronto last year, he didn't play that great. The one thing I want to talk about this team and what they can do, the one thing that keeps standing out at me looking at the report here is Shea Theodore is going to be on a different team next year. There's no way he re-signs in Vegas. He's an unrestricted free agent. He makes $5.2 million. He would deserve to make more than that. There's no way Vegas can keep that under the books, and they've now committed to Hanif and Pietrangelo. That's their top two. Cap-wise,
Right.
that's what they're running with. So that will be interesting to see how that plays out. They'll be in a playoff spot. Do you just keep him? From what we've seen from Vegas in the past, they'll probably just keep him and lose him for nothing because that seems to be kind of their strategy in a sense, is they just go for it. But it will be interesting to see what goes on that side of things. But yeah, a lot of this is going to come down to health. The Vegas has a lot of guys who notoriously have a track record of being injured. Shea Theodore gets injured. Mark Stone gets injured. Jack Eichel gets injured. So it'll be interesting to see if these guys can stay healthy long enough. But they're like a higher ceiling version of Seattle, just in the fact that they have players who can, that can make a difference individually. Like a Jack Eichel and a Mark Stone are an echelon above the star players for Seattle. Pietrangelo and Hanifin and Shea Theodore are a little bit step above what Seattle has on the blue line, right? So like they are fairly close to me with Seattle. It's just they have the difference makers, the star power that Seattle doesn't have.
Yeah, and I think, the area, like we said, with Vegas that you look at as far as being a concern is goaltending, and as of now, they don't have a marked improvement at goaltending over Seattle. So I think as far as that's concerned, there's certainly a lot here to just be super questionable of. Again, allegedly, like, the cap is supposed to go up, which puts them at, I think that based on what I'm looking at right now, it looks like they're going to have about $65 million against the cap next year, which should give them about $25 million because people expect the cap to be around 90. Maybe there's a way that they keep Shea Theodore and they just go Pietrangelo, Hanifin, Theodore, Whitecloud. Whitecloud's on that great deal. He's making less than $3 million a year. Maybe they talk to Theodore and he sticks around and he makes 8.5-ish. But if you're him, do you want to make less than Pietrangelo? Do you want to make more than Hanifin? Right.
Essentially, right? So yeah.
And then what does that do for their ability to keep Jack Eichel, who's a free agent in 2 summers? How are they able to build out the bottom of this roster, right? They've got some kind of built-in help with the fact that Brisson and Holtz and Schwint are all RFAs and don't make very much right now, so there's an opportunity for them to either play their way into big deals or be, again, young and improving depth. I guess I would say the biggest advantage that Vegas has more than anything is off the ice.
Mm-hmm.
They still have Bruce Cassidy as the coach, and I think he's still one of the best coaches in the league. And they have a front office who has shown a willingness to make hard choices and make difficult decisions in order to maximize what they think is this team's window and what they can get out of it. Do you have any thoughts about the Lehner thing?
I don't know enough about it from what I saw the report on it, but I don't know enough about it.
So what do you know of it?
He's not reporting to training camp, right? I believe.
Right.
Yeah. Beyond that, I don't know.
Did you know that his full $5 million came off the books?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And basically, what ended up happening is the NHLPA and the NHL came to an agreement where he's still going to get paid his salary, but his cap is coming off of his cap hit is coming off the books, and according to the NHL and the NHLPA, it is a very special circumstance by which this is a thing. And obviously, because it's Vegas, everybody is pissed about it, because why does Vegas get the special treatment and all that stuff? And honestly, maybe, but also they asked You know what I mean? Like open mouths get fed, like squeaky wheels get the grease. Like they have shown a willingness to just be like, well, what if? Like, what if we just ask for this? Like, what if we just do this? Like, this is in the rules. This is how we should do it. By all accounts, they had every opportunity, or they had, a big part of, I think, why the deal came to is they apparently had, according to sources who probably are on their side in this or, are them, but they had enough evidence to have a meaningful run at getting the contract terminated and having it upheld. And they weren't trying to get out of paying the money to Robin Lehner. And again, this is probably all from their camp and how they're framing it, but whatever. They weren't interested in not paying Robin Lehner his money. They were interested in getting his cap hit. The only reason they wanted to terminate the contract was to get rid of the cap hit. So they basically came to a settlement where Robin Lehner is still going to get his money. It's going to still come out of the hockey-related revenue. And, the NHLPA is fine with this because their players' guaranteed contract is still guaranteed, and the NHL is fine with it because who gives a shit? It's $5 million against the cap that they're taking off. Like, if you want to say it's inconsistent or it's unfair against all these other teams, like, yeah, but, like, I don't think the NHL is hurt here.
No.
Other than in reputation, which they don't really have a good one of anyways, so what do they give a shit? Or they've never really shown any interest in maintaining or improving their reputation among the fans. So I think all things considered, it's just one of those things that, like, yeah, if you want to be upset about it or think it's unfair, like, obviously you're more than welcome to do so, but I just think it's such a waste of time and energy to be pissed about it. Like,
no, yeah,
they asked for something, and again, for me, I think the reason I don't really give a shit is because Robin Lehner is still making his money.
Yeah.
Which is what matters.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Is that these players are still getting the salary owed to them and things like that. So, whatever.
It's a team showing the willingness to try and find a loophole, but it's still within the rules. And Vegas has shown since the very beginning that they are willing to try and find those avenues. And listen, it's been successful for them, so why would you not try and continue to do so if it can help you continue your run by getting $5 million off the books? You can call it whatever you want. It's within the rules, and I'm not a huge fan of Vegas by any means, but you can't get mad at them or hate them for figuring out a way that's completely within the rules of the game to get out of $5 million of cap space. And they're still, like I said, they're still paying the player, so it's not sleazy by any means. It's not like they're
exactly.
Playing it,
they
right?
Didn't do what the fucking Kings did and fucking plant pills in the back of Mike Richards' car and send him across the border. Like, it's not like that. And I really do think that ultimately, as I sit here and talk about it, like, that's the part of it why I really don't give a shit, is because Robin Lehner is going to get paid.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't give a shit about Robin Lehner. What I care about is the precedent of NHL teams being able to get out of paying players money that they agreed. Like, when they sign these guaranteed contracts, like, again, it can never be understated how important it is that the NHL has guaranteed contracts. That makes a big difference for these guys, especially in a league where careers are short and fickle and injuries happen and teams' whims change. These contracts being fully guaranteed is a win, and every single time that is undermined is one of the very things that this PA has ever done. So I ended up on a soapbox there, and I apologize. I wasn't, that's not what I was trying to do. But it's just one of those things that it just really matters to me. And as far as Vegas is concerned, they've got 3 really good top 6 centers, 3 really good top 4 defensemen, one of the best coaches in hockey, in a front office with a proven track record of being fucking down for anything. Vegas is the crazy friend in and I mean like teen comedy movie level absurd, right? Like Tom Green in Road Trip. Like, he's just, that organization is such a wild card in terms of being willing to do whatever, to make these things happen. That I don't think you can rule them out, and I think you have to look at them organizationally as being in a better position than maybe the roster would lead you to believe.
Yeah. I think the big roster concerns that you look at for them is they've got to replace the loss of Jonathan Marchessault somehow. Their stars have to stay healthy. Shea Theodore, Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, they have to stay healthy, and the goaltending is going to be the major issue. But this team's always competitive. They always stick around. They fight through injuries when they still make the playoffs. They're still a tough team to play against. It's going to be impossible to play them in their own barn, so they're still going to be hovering around the 40 to 45 win mark, the 90 to 100 point range. So they're going to stick around there. I can't see them falling off too much. The roster's too good. And they'll be right in the mix with the next team here where they were last year, which is the Kings. The Kings, not a bunch of change from last year. You lose Pierre-Luc Dubois. You lose Drew Doughty for the beginning of the season. You lose Cam Talbot. You replace him with Darcy Kemper. Beyond that, I'm looking at the roster here. You lost Victor Arvidsson at some point, but he only played 18 games for the Kings last year. You lose Matt Roy, but you bring in, I think Joel Edmondson comes into the team. So all the major losses you've essentially covered by any means. So it's really just, can this team get better with what they have? And I think the main hallmark to that, and if they're going to be better, I think it comes down to Quinton Byfield, how good he is this year. Because you know what you're going to get from Kopitar. You know what you're going to get from Fiala and Adrian Kempe and Philip Deneau and those guys. So you know what you're going to get from them. You hope you get Drew Doughty back at a certain point. So you've got a good floor established there. And the way this team plays defensively, they're one of the toughest teams to play against. But if Quinton Byfield can turn into like an 80, 90-point player, the Kings are going to be a problem. They're going to be tough to play against. Matching up against Kopitar and Byfield on a nightly basis is not going to be a lot of fun. And another one, I think Brant Clark on the blue line too, because he's going to have a couple months to take over power play one, is potentially from Drew Doughty. If both of those guys take significant steps forward, Byfield becomes an elite number one center in this league, and Brant Clark can establish himself as an everyday top four defenseman. That's how the Kings get better this year than they were last year. And that puts them in the conversation, I think, with Vancouver and with Edmonton, unfortunately, as a team that maybe an outside chance, but has a chance at challenging for the division.
I have to admit that I am all over the place with how I feel about LA.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first question you have to ask is, are they going to play Quinton Byfield at center? Because if they
have. So,
right.
Yeah.
If they are, then I would say Kopitar, Byfield, Deneau is
nice.
very good. Then you add in the fact that they have Kempe and they have Fiala, so they've got difference makers on the wings. They brought in, why can't I think of his fucking name? Tanner Jeannot, who, again, hasn't been great since his kind of big rookie year push, but has shown some ability to, generate offense.
It's tough to play against, too, like a third line with him and Deneau. That's
right,
a
exactly.
matchup, yeah.
And Kaliev maybe even, like those three together, like that's not nothing. That's real. And I'm here for all of that. I like Brant Clark. I think he has a chance to be special. The problem is are you going to want him to be special as a rookie? That puts a lot of pressure on him.
Yeah, he has no choice now. That's to start the year. So
and here's an insane thing. You are asking him to step into the gap created by one of the 10 best players to play for the franchise ever, who is still on the roster and is still contributing, right? Like, you can say a lot of things, but I think it is more than fair to say that Kopitar and Doughty are top 10 all-time, if not top 5 all-time Kings, as far as what they've achieved for this franchise, right?
Yeah.
I don't like Darcy Kemper.
I like him better than Cam Talbot last year, to be honest with you.
I mean, I don't think that is because Darcy Kemper is good. I think that's because Cam Talbot is at the end of his career. For
And
me,
the Kings are like the Bruins, and they the system they play in is very goalie friendly.
But
That
here's
like David Rittich had a 921 save percentage for the Kings last year.
right. But that was playing a Todd McClellan style and then switching to a 1-3-1. And they have flat out come out and said that they are
Yeah, I
not going to
saw
play a 1-3-1. And it's Jim Hiller, I believe. It's going to be his first year in charge, completely in charge from the beginning. And he apparently isn't like has said like he's not going to make them play a super defensive style. Like I get that there were criticisms of Todd McClellan and frustrations with him, but you knew exactly how his teams were going to play. They were going to play a structured game in front of him, and those goalies were going to have a chance, like you're saying, to play well and not have to play great. I don't know if this new coach is any good, and I don't like Darcy Kemper enough to think he's going to make it better. Like, the Capitals went with a dude who had never played before over Darcy Kemper. They traded him for the worst contract in hockey. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a reason that they got this dude, and it's not because he was great. He's good enough. And I don't know, without Drew Doughty, as good as I think parts of this blue line are, I don't love, missing Drew Doughty for that long. Like, asking, like, because it's two gaps, right? It's the gap from Drew Doughty to replacement level, and then it's replacement level veteran to rookie. Yeah. Right? You can say what you will about Luke Schenn, Brent Clark over Luke Schenn every game because Brent Clark's upside is so much higher. He's much more dynamic with the puck, blah, blah, blah. Luke Schenn has been in this league a long time, and you know exactly what he's going to do, and he knows exactly what he's going to do. Success rate is a completely different conversation, but he knows how to be a player in this league. Even when skill is going the other direction, that's still that familiarity and that comfort playing at the NHL level, not having it as a loss. And then you again take out the fact that you're taking one of the best players on your team, the preeminent defenseman on this team, the guy who generates the most offense, who generates big chances. You're putting him out there down a goal, you're putting him out there up a goal, like all that shit, right? I think they missed the playoffs.
Wow. I can't see it, dude. I can't see it.
The only thing about them not missing the playoffs that I think is in their favor is that I don't think the Central is great. So I think it's hard to say 5 teams from the Central make it.
Yeah, I can't see that. Like, I think there's an argument to say the Kings could be marginally worse than last year. Like, they were good under Jim Hiller, 23-12-1. I think they could score more goals this year for sure. And like you said, maybe sacrificing the 1-3-1 means they concede a little bit more, so it evens out. Like from going from 250 to 270 in goals scored, you go from 215 to 230 in goals against, something like that, where it evens out a little bit. You just play a little bit more high tempo game. I think Quentin Byfield's turning into a superstar this year. I think that's going to be enough to, you say mitigate the loss of Pierre-Luc Dubois, but like this team will overcome that easily. He wasn't great in a Kings uniform. I really like the floor and the mix of this forward group, the way they've split it up. Kopitar and Kempe are going to play together, and they like playing Alex Lafreniere on that top line. You got Byfield playing with Fiala, and right now Warren Foegele. You could bump Trevor Moore up there if you want, and that they've got Moore playing with Deneau and Jeannot. On the third line. So I don't hate it. They've got some young kids who can go, like Turcotte could maybe take steps forward. We've been waiting for that forever. Or Kings fans have. We've got Akil Thomas who could play on the roster. You've got some good young guys down in the AHL that could make their way up. But that top 9 is fairly solid. Like you said, the issue is, can you mitigate the loss of Drew Doughty for when he is gone? With a defense core of Mikey Anderson, Jordan Spence, Gavrikov, Burrows, Edmondson, and Brant Clark. I think the good thing is Brant Clark isn't having to come in and replace every part of Drew Doughty. He's going to come in and be the power play 1, and he'll probably still only play about 18, 19 minutes a night, and they're going to kind of mitigate his minutes and dance around using him in tough situations and try and still baby him a little bit, which I think is the right approach. I think it's a really good position for Brant Clark to be in, because he's going to get power play 1, and then they're going to rely on Gavrikov and Anderson and Edmondson and Spence and others to fill the rest of the hole left by Drew Doughty. I just think defensively, more than anything, are the Kings going to be able to fill that hole from Drew Doughty? Offensively, I think it's fine. I think Brant Clark is talented enough with the players he's going to play with on Power Play 1 that it's not going to make a difference. Like, it's going to be Kopitar, Kempe, Fiala, and probably Byfield playing with Brant Clark on Power Play 1. He'll be fine. He's talented enough offensively to certainly make an impact there. It's the rest of it for replacing Drew Doughty for the time being, if the Kings have enough depth there to do it. And then a full season of a Jim Hiller system. How does that look for Darcy Kemper? I think the Kings, just based on the 30-plus games they played with him last year, that it's not significantly different than Todd McLellan. I think that they'll be good enough in front of him that Darcy Kemper can put up a 9-10, 9-12 save percentage, and that's enough for them to win hockey games. And I think Darcy Kemper has proven he can do that over his career. I don't love him by any means, but certainly I think he's good enough and has been good enough in some bad situations for him to just be enough for the Kings. Now, when you come into playoffs, and that's a whole other argument, but for them to be a 95 to 100 point team again and make the playoffs, I think it's enough.
Yeah, all right. I don't want to see Kemper's goals saved above replacement last year. I guess I have no reason to have faith in Jim Hiller.
No, yeah, there's absolutely the small sample size, so he's been an assistant
concerned
coach
about that. I think between a goalie I don't think very highly of and a coach I don't know anything about, I'm worried. I think the drop off from Arvidsson to Foegele is bigger than you're saying it is. I think Arvidsson's a much better player, and I think he's capable of producing. And I think that the drop from Roy to Edmondson is considerable. And that also has me concerned. Let's see. Washington. Darcy Kemper. KVMPR. That's him. Negative 1.73 goals saved above expected in 33 games. 103 goals allowed on 101 expected goals. Yeah, I think there's a world where Seattle, like Matty Beniers, takes a jump, and Seattle beats them for a playoff spot.
It's definitely possible. I just think the high-end talent plus what I think Byfield can do this year is enough for them to pip Seattle to a playoff spot. I just think Seattle's going to be marginally better than they were last year, but not enough. Again, not enough star power for them to take any steps forward. Like, you could argue Fiala, Kopitar, Kempe on Seattle is the best offensive player on that team. And that's 3 of the Kings forward. You can put Byfield on that team, too, and argue that he could outproduce the rest of the forward talent on Seattle.
Absolutely.
Their best players. So you got 4 of their forwards on the Kings that could be Seattle's best forward in a season. So
yeah, and I don't like Grubauer.
Yeah.
I like Bilesma, though.
Yeah. Again, there's concerns for both teams, and there's a big mix there. Like the Kings, the Golden Knights, Seattle, I think will be in a big mix of 3 there.
Yeah.
2 of the 3 will probably make the playoffs. It wouldn't be surprising to see one of those 3 miss out per se. Like Seattle's probably the favorite to miss out, but if you said something went wrong for one of those other teams and they missed the playoffs, something like that happens every year. So it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. Now, if you look at the next 2 teams and they were one of the teams to miss, I think that would be a little bit shocking. Maybe not the last team we'll talk about, but at least next team.
Let's do that. Yeah, let's just keep going the way we're doing it. It's fine.
Yeah, with the Oilers, they seem like the team I'm the most confident in this division. And that's probably, again, just the fact that you're retaining the all-star, superstar talent on this team. And you've got McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, Hyman, Nugent-Hopkins. Nothing has really changed. I think Stuart Skinner, for a full season, he just needs to be marginally better than he was last year. And that's a step forward for them. He was okay, but in 136 games, only had a 905 save percentage, and that's really just because the amount of goals that the Oilers can score is significantly more than almost anybody else in this division at 294. The interesting thing for the Oilers will be Vander Kane's gone for 4 to 6 months, so it's not it's not a major loss, but he's a decent enough player that you have to kind of mitigate that. I do really like the additions of Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson to this team, though.
Mm-hmm.
I think it rounds out some depth in at least the top 6 that this team hasn't had for a while. You do now have a full season of Adam Henrique as well, so you could presumably go McDavid, Draisaitl, Henrique down the middle, which is very, very nice. On the right side, Hyman, Arvidsson, Connor Brown is fairly good for 3 of your top 9 wingers. On the left side, Jeff Skinner, Nugent Hopkins, Matthias Janmark. Janmark could maybe eventually lose that job to Podkolzin, who they got from Vancouver. So there's enough there, surrounded by just some of the league's best players in McDavid and Draisaitl, and even Zach Hyman to some extent as well. They finally have the defenseman that they needed in Evan Bouchard to be kind of the main guy in that team. Frees up Ekholm and Nurse to do things a little bit more within their wheelhouse and not have to be a power play quarterback, which they tried to mold Nurse into early in his career. There's enough going for the Oilers that I still have some concerns about the way the team is built, but they're insulated by enough all-star talent that they'll be right in the mix again, and for me, they're the favorites to win the division.
Yeah.
I'm not sold on their head coach still either, but I just think this team is good enough just with the talent they have.
Yeah, I mean, look, dude, they've got fucking Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Do I think Zach Hyman is going to score 50 goals again or whatever he scored? No, I don't. I see that coming back down to
earth. That and score 60, right? So,
right, you've got that. Like, I think that if they get a full season of Victor Arvidsson, hell, if they get 65 games of Victor Arvidsson, I think that's going to be huge for them. Yeah. I think they've got the opportunity to at any time make sure that Ekholm, Bouchard are out on that ice. I will say that is a proper top pair. If Evan Bouchard is who he showed us he was last year and in the playoffs the year before that, like, that is one of the best pairs in the National Hockey League. If Evan Bouchard is really a dynamic, offensively creative and productive blue liner, then there's no 1.5 minutes that they can't win, right? Because at the end of the day, they can always just fall back on the fact that they can put out McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Ekholm, Bouchard. There's not a lot of teams that can beat that 5.
No.
That is probably, I think, the best case in the world for them being a Stanley Cup contender. Yep. Is when it comes down to it, they can beat almost anybody's 5-man unit, which in the playoffs is the thing that matters. Throughout the regular season, they're going to keep Draisaitl and McDavid separated, except for the power play, where they're going to score 5 goals a game. You know what I mean? Like, it just is what it is. This is a regular season team that should probably contend for the President's Trophy if they can get consistent goaltending. Again, I have no reason to trust Knobloch. I do not think it is fair to assume at any given point that the coach has been the solution or the problem.
Yeah.
I don't think that this roster was as strong as it could have been. I think last year's roster was probably the best this team has looked in the McDavid era. And so it's just, again, it comes down to, like, is Stuart Skinner good? And if he's good, then this team shouldn't have any problems. Can Knobloch instill a system that just creates a floor for his bottom 6 and his bottom 4 defensemen? If he can do that, they should be fine. And then it just gets into the playoffs, and then it becomes, can they generate? But, again, Darnell Nurse is their third best defenseman. That's a concern, right? You can't say that that's not nothing. And I think the biggest issues that you have when you're looking at Edmonton is it doesn't feel like there's a lot of flexibility. It doesn't feel like they have a lot of opportunities to improve the roster. That is part of why them having Evander Kane on LTIR or on injured reserve is going to be so meaningful. They might be able to use it. They could very much just Patrick Kane, Nikita Kucherov him and have him come back at the playoffs. So I think all of the questions about Edmonton are about what they can do in the postseason. But other than that, yeah, this team should probably win the division. They should probably win the West. You know, I guess you could say, your Colorados and your Dallases should be able to push them as far as being contenders, but on paper, man, I don't know. This Edmonton team's fucking scary. They just are. Like, I don't,
Yeah.
I can be glib about it all I want, but it doesn't change the fact that this is, one of the most talented rosters from a high-end standpoint in the league. And the question
the
is...
floor is like 100 points with the talent they have.
Yeah. They need a fourth defenseman.
Yeah.
Actually, in a perfect world, they need a third defenseman. They need to move Darnell Nurse down into a 3-4 role instead of being in a 2-3 role, right? Where it's either we need you to carry your own pair or we're playing you on your offside with Matthias Ekholm and we need you to generate offense. And he's shown an ability to generate offense, but that's not what you want him to have to do at a high level. They got to find somebody.
Perfect for them, but there's no way I think it would happen in division, especially between these two teams, is getting Rasmus Andersson from Calgary to play alongside Darnell Nurse, and you play Ekholm with Bouchard. I think that would be great for Edmonton, but I don't think
who else would work?
Who?
Cam Fowler.
Yeah.
He actually would work.
Play one of them on their offside, and it would be fine.
And if nothing else, Nurse has shown a willingness to be physical in his own end, right?
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't always been the most effective defender, but he's absolutely shown a willingness to be physical, and we've seen him play good and play well. And if you're not giving him your toughest matchups and he's on your second penalty kill, you can do a lot fucking worse, man. Say what I will about Cam Fowler. He's better than Cody Ceci, who wasn't the problem, but wasn't helping. So, this team's really good. I don't know what else to say. I would like to see, obviously, more from Stuart Skinner, and I remain agnostic at best on Chris Knobloch.
Yeah, I mean, he walked himself into a fairly good situation. Speaking of coaches and how we feel about coaches, how do you feel about Rick Tocchet coaching the Canucks to a 50-win season? And this is the first time I'm finding out that Adam Foote is an assistant coach in Vancouver as well. I didn't know that, but he is. Him and Mike Yeo are the assistant coaches in Vancouver. I do not know how to feel about the Vancouver Canucks. They are largely the exact same team as they were last year.
Yep.
Adding Jake DeBrusk and not losing. Still have obviously Miller, Hughes, Pedersen, Besser, Roenick, Garland, Hoglander, Dakota Joshua. I think McKayev's still there, so they still have all these guys. They had Jake DeBrusk, a good addition to the forward group. On the blue line, it's, again, roughly the same. It's Hughes, Hronik, Myers, and then they add Susi and Forbort, which I don't hate that. I think those are solid additions. They lose Zadorov, I think, is kind of the main loss for them. But
they had Carson Soucy last year.
Okay, yeah, he played 40 games for them. You're right, yeah. And then Thatcher Demko, obviously still in net, but out for the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season. This is my main thing with the Canucks. There are two main things with the Canucks. One, Thatcher Demko needs to stay healthy.
Yep.
And because beyond him, it's Kevin Lankinen and Arturs Silovs. No faith in that whatsoever. And two, is this team for real? I just have no faith in the Canucks being a 105, 110 point team. I don't know why. They have the talent to do it. I just don't believe this team has finally figured it out. I can't. They're the Canucks. They just find ways to mess things up. And despite having one of the best offensive defensemen in the league and one of the best two-way players in the league in JT Miller and Elias Pettersson, they've got the talent. They made good offseason acquisitions. I just still don't know if I trust Rick Tocchet and the Vancouver Canucks to be the division's best team. I can't get past that. I don't have a logical, rational reason for it. I just can't.
Well, yeah.
Do
So
they have Daniel Sprong apparently too? Did Daily Faceoff is telling me they have?
Yeah, they have
Sprong.
Daniels. They have, yeah.
Oh, well, there we go. Now they're a 115-point team, obviously.
Yeah. They got him for less than $1 million. An elite goal scorer, and they got him for less than $1 million.
They have him playing with Pettersson and DeBrusque right now. So
Fucking, what's insane about that is he's probably the best player fucking Pedersen has played with since JT Miller.
that might be true. Pettersson finally gets line mates this year, playing with Sprong and DeBrusque.
I think Quinn Hughes is really fucking good, man.
Yeah.
I think Quinn Hughes is insanely special, and I think it is very cool to watch him be a leader on this team, be the leader on this team. He's the captain, and the way he plays is fun and exciting. And then you add in the fact that it looks like Elias Pettersson has once again found his footing. Based on the way you heard people talk about him last year, you would never realize he put up almost 90 points. Third straight 30-goal season. And he has shown in the past that he can be a plus defender. Rick Tocchet seems like the perfect coach for Connor Garland. The question, I guess, is what version of Philip Hronik are you going to get? And is Brock Besser at least a 30-goal scorer again this year, right? I don't think you're going to expect him to score 40 goals again. He'd never done it before that. But boy, if you could
scored 30 before that, yeah.
Yeah, if you could count on Brock Besser to get you at least 30 goals next year, I think you feel really good about this team.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard some stuff about Thatcher Demko that makes me nervous.
Yeah.
I was listening to Puck Soup, and one of the things that they were talking about is the idea that he might have to learn how to play goalie differently than he has in the past.
Never not play with pain or get fully healthy with the injury he's dealing with.
That's insane. Hope he can figure out his recovery, get himself to wherever he needs to get to. If he's not the goalie of this team, that's a problem.
They need to go out and do
Seelobs and Lankinen are fine. Seelobs looked good a little bit in the playoffs last year, but that team last year was not the same, right? They were coming off a great season. They were fucking absolutely high on their shit. They were able to beat Nashville. Then they rolled in the second round, and that's when they lost to Edmonton, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But, boy, I'm not feeling super great about Seelobs being my starter from day one. And I don't know how many goalies are out there that they can go get that are definitively better.
Yeah, it's one of those teams. It's you look at when we talk about the Kings and the structure in front of them, David Rittich having a .921 save percentage last year is not so much David Rittich being unbelievable as much as is the system in front of them. This Canucks team, they're not bad defensively, but Casey DeSmith played 29 games and .896 save percentage. Thatcher Demko had .918. Thatcher Demko was very, very good last year, and it's not just because of the team in front of him. So I don't think it's so much as a plug in any decent goalie and they'll do good in this team. They need somebody significant to come in if Thatcher Demko can't go or is not the guy or doesn't get healthy. The problem is the options that you could have got, if they somehow got Markstrom from Calgary because he was obviously in Vancouver before, when the Saros rumors were out there, those types of players just aren't available. You can't rely on like John Gibson being the guy or going out and trying to add somebody somewhere else. They need Thatcher Demko to be the guy. Like and
Yeah.
they don't really have the flexibility to necessarily go out and add anybody without having to move a significant piece of their roster right now, which I'm sure they would rather not do. They've carefully kind of constructed this roster, and I like what they have.
Well, here's the thing to that end.
Mhm.
They have Thatcher Demko, who has no trade protection.
Right.
And at this point, because of the uncertainty around his recovery and his projectable play moving forward, is probably most value to them as a $5 million cap hit.
Mm-hmm.
They have $3 million in cap space on top of that. This is a team that is going to see the Ekman-Larsson buyout go up next year. They're going to have to hopefully re-sign Besser after a great year at the end of this year. There's a lot here. That $5 million cap hit this year and next year is probably their best opportunity. Is probably their best opportunity to address that position, but they almost have to use it for that position.
Yeah.
So it puts them in a weird spot in terms of their cap.
But like, who do you go out and even get? Like, there's really not anyone available. Like, if Carolina decides to move on from Freddie Anderson, but that's not a significant upgrade by any means. I'm looking across the tail. Like, you lost out on Allmark already. He's gone. There's not really any options. Like, again, John Gibson.
It's Gibson,
or if
maybe
somehow
Yari.
Winnipeg falls off and Connor Hellebuck wants out.
That's honestly,
like, that's
that's
the
probably
pipe
it
dream,
is.
right? Like
That's probably exactly right. Yeah, that's probably exactly. Is you hope everything falls apart in Winnipeg, which I think is absolutely on the table in a way people are not willing to talk about. And you go out and you make Connor Hellebuck your big splash, and you basically
hope he
bring
wants
him
to
in.
stay in Canada and move to Vancouver. He's on a
He
no-move
would
clause.
he would love to move to Vancouver.
Yeah, well,
He lives in Winnipeg. He would love to move to Vancouver.
yeah, true. Yeah, again, yeah. There's not a lot of options out there. So right now, obviously, you go in, you hope Thatcher Demko's okay. But if you ever get the inclination that it's going south in a hurry, this team's not in a position to just ride it out with the two other guys that they have. They need to try and do something.
John Gibson,
Could
congratulations.
work out. It could
John
work
Gibson
out for
would
Anaheim. It could work out
fucking
for Anaheim because I think outside of America with Hellebuck being available, like John Gibson probably has to be at this point in time the top goaltender available in the market. I'm trying to think of anybody else, and I don't. They've all moved.
Again,
They've all moved.
in theory, like, there's one guy who's out there who isn't getting traded and will be getting extended, but theoretically hasn't yet. So Vancouver could go out and get, like, Shesterkin.
Yeah, but
But they're not. I mean, they're not gonna.
No.
But they could. They could go get Korpisalo, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm sure Boston would have no problem now that they have Swayman signed.
Possibly.
To moving on from him.
Possibly, but it seems like Gibson. But again, the Canucks should be good enough to finish and challenge for the division again. Just there's part of me that I just can't. I need to see another season of it before I buy in, considering where they were 2 seasons ago. So I need to see another year of this. But they're certainly talented enough to finish up near the top of the division again. Okay, so before we wrap up, what are your standings? Your final standings for Pacific Division? What do you got?
I will go San Jose. Oh, wait a minute. I was trying to write these down last time. Whatever. San Jose, Calgary. Anaheim. I didn't want to do that, but I kind of have to in good conscience. LA. Seattle. Vancouver, Vegas, Edmonton. Ugh.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
I don't like mine too because it's gonna fairly be similar to last year. But I got Sharks, Flames, Ducks, Seattle, um, Golden Knights, Kings, Canucks, Oilers. Like it's fairly. There's not a bunch of movement. It's just the Oilers overtaking the Canucks and the Flames falling down to 7th, and the two other teams just moving up in front of them. So I can't see it being much different. I hold out faith the Ducks can push a little bit higher, but I mean our next show that we're going to record is the Ducks season preview.
Let me ask this as a teaser for the preview, and to keep it about the rest of the teams. If Anaheim is to make a playoff push, which team in the Pacific is going to struggle? That is going to facilitate it.
Of the top 4, right?
Of the teams ahead of them in the 5, because we both have them 6th.
Yeah, I think they would just end up organically being better than Seattle. So it would be I would imagine it would be Vegas, with dealing with injuries and not a lot of faith in Aiden Hill. I think it could be them that would slide down. Again, I can make an argument just as easily for the Kings or even the Canucks, but I think it would be Vegas, and it would just.
You think Mark Stone gets hurt? Aiden Hill isn't great.
Jack Eichel could go down.
See, I think if they finish in 4th, they beat LA and they beat Seattle.
Yeah. It's either LA or Vegas. And Seattle's just organically.
Here's the thing about Vegas for me. They still have Bruce Cassidy.
Yeah.
And I've seen Aiden Hill be pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Those two things alone, and how strong I think that defense has a chance to be, at least that top 4, that to me is enough that I think, this really does kind of come down to coach and goalie for me at the end of the day. And I think Cassidy and Hill is the strongest of those 3 goalie coach pairings.
Yeah, no, listen,
Weird.
Seattle's a given. They'd be in front of Seattle, and then it would be one of LA or Vegas that they knock off to get into the playoffs, or you hope it's a 5 playoff team Pacific, and they make it, but I can't.
But then they have to beat the Blues, they have to beat the Wild, and that's a lot. I mean, they're going to have to beat most of those teams if they want to make the playoffs anyways, but still, that's a lot to ask. Yeah.
All right, well, we made it through. Season starts tomorrow, so I'll get this up as soon as we can. And then, we got our Ducks season preview, which we're actually about to hop off here and record right now. And obviously, we got a little bit of leeway with that because the Ducks don't officially begin their season until the 12th. We start opening. It's back-to-back, right? Opening against the Sharks and then the next night against Vegas, right? I think.
For Anaheim?
Yes.
No, they opened the season in Utah.
Do they?
Aren't they on the road in Utah?
Now I gotta check.
God damn it.
Nope. It is Saturday, October 12th against the Sharks, and then Sunday, October 13th against Vegas, and then Wednesday, October 16th against Utah.
Utah's at home.
Yeah, Utah's the home opener.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So listen, you're right. You're sort of right about something. But.
Absolute fool. Yeah, back to back, San Jose, Vegas. Does this? All right, we're gonna use this as a preview one last time. Yeah. We're gonna do. Does this mean we're gonna see James Reimer get the season opener?
Maybe. Okay. So, I thought about this. Do you get strategic like that right off the bat, or do you just say, "Listen, Dostal's our starter. He's starting opening night." That's the tough thing for me. Is Dostal's going to get the home opener, so that's a given. But
so the question is, are you playing him 3 in a row or 2 in a row?
No. It's are you getting strategic in the sense, are you giving him the harder matchup in Vegas and giving Ryan, which you normally would, or
He's
are you
saying
game. It's the first game of the season, we're rolling out our best lineup, it doesn't matter, and Dostal's going to start game 1? That's my question mark on what they're going to do, because again,
let me say
the smart thing is to play Dostal against Vegas and Reimer against San Jose, but I don't know if they'll do it.
I don't think Dostal in Vegas and home at Utah is up in the air. I think those are set in stone. The question is,
No way.
are
you're
you
gonna
going to
play
give
them all
Dostal
That's
3
wild.
straight games?
No, I don't think so. But, I mean, I don't know. You just acquired Reimer, so who knows?
Because, here's the thing, 12, 13, 2 days off, 16. Then you can have Reimer pick up the next game. So it's a back-to-back, but then a full 2 days off, and then one more game.
You want to put Reimer on the
Throw
road in
Reimer to
Colorado?
Who gives a fuck? Hell,
Yeah.
you can play him in Colorado and the next night, and 2 nights later in LA, and then give Dostal the San Jose game again. And then you leave for a 4-game road trip. Then you come back for a homestand? Yeah, dude. I think you have to play Dostal against Vegas and Utah. I think the question is do you think San Jose sucks enough that it's not a problem to play him 180 minutes to start the season?
Yeah, I don't know. That'll be interesting to see what they do. I don't three starts in a
Because
row for Dostal.
if Gibby's healthy, you give Gibby the game opener. You give him the season opener.
Yes.
You play Dostal versus Vegas, and then you just say we split the away games. Gibby's the veteran; he gets the start.
Yeah.
And then whoever gets the home opener is whoever plays better in those 2 games.
Yeah,
but
that's fair. But
Gibby's out, so it doesn't matter.
Now. Yeah, I don't know. I would not have in any world guessed Dostal starting all 3. For me, I don't know. It just comes down to the organizational decision. Are you going to be strategic off the bat or off the rip? Or are you just going to say you want your best lineup in opening night to make a statement and you're going to play Dostal against the Sharks? And then you can make the decision to kind of go along with your theory after that. Like if Dostal faces 17 shots and it's an easy win, then you can play him the next night against Vegas if you want. But if it's a tougher game and he faces 30 plus against San Jose, then maybe you have to go Reimer. I wouldn't. I would start Reimer. I would start Reimer against San Jose. I just have this feeling they might want to run Dostal.
I don't think you're wrong to say wanting Dostal to play game 1, given Gibby not being part of the question. Yeah, I think that makes total sense.
Yeah, it's probably not the smart decision.
Maybe you get Reimer Vegas and just say that's a game we might lose anyway, so fuck him. And let's give Dostal the easy win.
And then Reimer comes out and shuts out Vegas in Vegas.
Oh no, we'll have beat Vegas.
Yeah, it's such a shame.
All right, let's wrap that there.
Yeah, we'll wrap it there. And next time you'll hear us, which for us is immediately after this show, is recording our full in-depth Ducks season preview. Yeah, my internet's gonna cut out. All right, we'll catch you guys soon.
Bye, everybody.